So, Brandon, is your mind blowing? Did WWE and Netflix reinvent professional wrestling by streaming it instead of, well, for me, streaming it because I have DirecTV streaming service, and Rod's been streaming for years for YouTube TV and Sling, and I dropped cable years ago. But obviously, this is a big deal. I mean, they're live globally, reaching a whole new audience that has Netflix but doesn't have cable. There's a big overlap, but there's a lot of people who just have Netflix. And they were in LA and just brought out a lot of stars. A lot of them have ties to Netflix. Hyped it as a WrestleMania buzz, a WrestleMania worthy vibe. I don't know. We can talk about the crowd, and a big lineup. So yeah, just kind of what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that for all of the self-congratulatory sort of pomp and circumstance that they had, and all the celebrities that they paraded out there and wanted to highlight. I happened to notice during the main event, out of the corner of my eye, unless I was mistaken, it appeared as though Kieran Culkin was in the front row, and I'm thinking, I mean, outside of Travis Scott, like that's the biggest celebrity that you could have featured, and you didn't put him on camera. I mean, I know he's a fan.
He might have said,
"Yeah,
no, I'm not endorsing your product. Pay me or something." I don't know.
I mean, certainly possible. I do know he's a fan. But it just
he's
funny
watching
to
us now,
catch a glimpse of him.
He's a big fan of the show.
But yeah, I mean, it was a newsworthy event for sure. They certainly wanted to make you feel like this was a special night, and I do think that they were aided by that arena. I mean, this is the first time that they have done wrestling at the Intuit Dome, and it was just an incredibly impressive venue. And it's going to be interesting going forward, because I think starting next week you're going to see Raw look a lot more like Raw. Tonight looked very different, and it wasn't because of WWE's production, it was just the venue.
Well, yeah, I mean, totally right. I mean, they essentially brought back the camera that they used initially on SmackDown on Fox, which then they canceled after a few weeks because I honestly thought it was a cool innovation. I'm glad they tried some things 5 years ago on Fox, but it actually made the wrestlers not seem like larger than life stars. When you have a crane camera hovering over the ring looking down on them, I think it takes away some of the, part of it might be the 4K picture too, but in this case, it took away some of the mystique at that camera angle. I can't really put my finger on why, but when they went to it, it was, especially to the women's match, I noted, it felt almost like, I don't know, it wasn't it's a cool shot to think will work, but I don't know that it adds to the vibe of the match, because you're just looking down at the wrestlers, you lose the crowd. But that arena's amazing. But you're right, and I've been saying it for people who have been listening to me the last couple months. They're going to make a big deal out of Netflix, but everything that I was hearing, and frankly what Paul Levesque said to a degree too on a pay-per-view post show, PLE post show a few months ago, is we're just doing Raw. They're not doing it. This isn't Netflix. They bought us. They bought a turnkey finished product. He didn't say what I've been saying, but this is what I was told from people in WWE. If we thought something would have been cool to do, we'd have been doing it. Like, there's no reinventing it. They didn't turn the ring sideways. They didn't add sides. It's not round. They didn't hang it from the ring, or hang the ring from the ceiling. I mean, it was just, they lowered the entrance stage, which they do when they have big crowds like this. But you're right. I mean, when they're not in the Intuit Dome, which is just a phenomenal building. I watched it, like 2 YouTube videos on it just to get tours of it. And I mean, it's crazy cool. Although I heard, if you watch basketball in it, the scoreboard is so bright and in your face in the upper deck that the players look small and insignificant below, because the brighten, the vibrance of the scoreboard actually kind of just from the upper deck makes the players look like little ants, on the ground somewhere. But anyway,
you can tell it's modeled after the LED board that's at SoFi, which is, I believe, in the same complex.
Yeah.
So it looks very similar to that. I think that it probably architecturally was designed similarly, but the LEDs in the seats were really cool. I mean, that added a certain flair to the show. And that's going to be gone. I mean, So
Yep.
next week, I mean, it's just going to look like Raw. I mean,
Yep.
aside from, I guess, you know, you can smoke blunts on Netflix. I don't think they would have done that on USA.
Well, didn't McAfee say cloves or something, or he like tried to cover
He
for it.
did.
I mean,
Yeah.
who knows, right? Who knows? We don't know,
Yeah,
but I mean, it's legal. I mean, what do we? I mean, beer's legal, but there's certain shows you're not allowed to drink beer on. You know, so I mean, it's just like it's not so much a stigma as is. I guess I mean, we heard Rock got to say bullshit, so and then I think
but they did bleep it out in a pre-recorded promo later on.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't even pick up on that. The crowd chanted "Shut the F up." They didn't bleep him, and I think that's when McAfee said, "Oh, we're on Netflix." When the "Shut the F up" wasn't muted, which was very nice because I still have vertigo from the weeks that they were muting that, but missing, and it was like, come on, there's got to be a better way. Okay, so
it also quality-wise, it looked great. A marked improvement over the cable feed. They are still broadcasting in HD. There's no upgrade to 4K. So any 4K display that TVs are showing is just your TV doing the upscaling. They are still just broadcasting in HD. But Netflix is going to naturally look significantly better than your cable feed. So you're getting a much better HD picture.
That's the thing.
So that was a plus.
You're essentially throttled on, even a streaming service. You don't really get true vibrant 4K. So this picture looked better on my, nice LG screen, 4K TV. So, okay. So a lot happened on the show, but I wouldn't say a ton happened. I mean, there's definite talking points. We had a women's title change, a clean finish in the main event. CM Punk pinning Seth Rollins. Drew and Jay had their match. The Rock made an appearance. We had the solo Roman match, which certainly will be a topic of conversation as we keep rolling through here. The Rock having a couple interactions with Cody Rhodes, which is a conversation starter. It's also kind of breaks from, where they left off, which is kind of weird. Let's talk about that before we break and introduce ourselves in a minute or two. And we got a lot of callers lined up. Javier Machado is going to join us for some roundtable discussion too. We'll get his thoughts for a few minutes in a segment coming up. It's a big Netflix. We wanted to have a big cast, and given our record number of callers in the waiting room too, it's going to be a fun show with a lot of different opinions. Haven't even had a chance to look at the chat room yet, and I see we've got like almost 100 comments in there waiting for me to scroll over. But Brandon, what do you make of The Rock? Like, recap a little bit. I assume some people are watching us who don't have 3+ hours. It only went slightly over 3. There were rumors it would go close to 3.5. So I was relieved about that too, because I think it was smart. But yeah, what did you make of the reaction to Rock and what Rock said? What was newsworthy to you?
Very little was newsworthy, and I think that's
other than
the news.
He and Cody love each other.
Yeah, it was strange. It was a weird way to kick off the show. I thought that, I think we all could have guessed that Paul Levesque would be the first one in the ring. A lot of people thought that his music would be the first to hit, and it was not. He was already in the ring, so he circumvented that cliche and instead was just was already ready to go. So The Rock is the first music out there on the broadcast. Gets a huge babyface reaction, and largely just cuts a completely fluff promo. Just basically, talking up the partnership with Netflix and WWE. He mentions Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, talks about both of them positively, and points out Cody at ringside, which felt a little strange too, especially when Cody was then going to get involved in the match a little bit later on. It felt a little odd, and so did the decision to highlight him leaving later in the night and going through all of his Instagram live shots. The Rock was very much featured as what felt more like Dwayne Johnson than The Rock. Even though they referred to him as The Rock, it was very Dwayne Johnson-esque, and it made me wonder if there's a plan here. If maybe Rock, if Rock just decided, you know what, I don't want to put my body through it again. I don't want to do it. I don't want to. And I mean, we're almost bearing. I don't say we're bearing the lead because I don't want to say Hulk Hogan is ever the lead. But Hogan getting booed out of the building tonight is definitely going to be a topic of conversation. My phone blew up with texts from people just celebrating that moment. I mean, people were looking for.
I mean, this is not the Republican National Convention. Hogan just found out. So I want to save that because we'll certainly cover that. And our callers in chat will lead the way too. The Rock situation is interesting because there's been a lot of rumors. And if people listen to everything that I talk about on all my podcasts, I don't speculate a lot about WrestleMania and The Rock because I don't believe anybody knows. I don't think the reports out there. I mean, there's like false reports attributed to Fightful that they're trying to rebut, and there's people going, Rock won't be part of WrestleMania, and people saying, of course he will be. I have a wait and see attitude, in part because I sort of have a policy not to, and I think my people I talk to in wrestling kind of respect that I don't ever look for spoilers. I don't ask, for that stuff. I really want to be surprised when I watch. I treat WWE now like any TV series. I don't want to know what's going to happen on Severance when it returns in a couple weeks. Like, I just want to watch it. Let me watch it and enjoy it. And I hope most fans feel that way. That said, my reporting is such where I'm not ruling in or out Rock being there. Tonight made me think one of two things, and it doesn't clear anything up. One, he's not going to be part of WrestleMania this year for reasons you said or otherwise. Maybe he got embarrassed by last year. Maybe he realizes he's not super welcome, but he wants to make good, whatever. Physically, he's got other obligations, physically limited, whatever. Could be that. This also could be just laying low. Like, I'm going to play friendly, but let's not ignore that he stared at Roman Reigns. I mean, he looked him like there was that said future match, but not imminent match. So for there to be a match, there's got to be some sort of angle. Roman Reigns said January 27th is when he is going to have the big platform. He told Heyman that's the date that he wants to be acknowledged and ceremonially, be acknowledged as a tribal chief again. So I'm not ruling that out either. But
that also served as a tease for 2K25 as well, which I presume that was them hinting that Reigns is the cover star this year.
Yep. Yeah, because when Heyman and Reigns went in a door, their locker room had closed and they showed that logo.
The logo.
Yep. So we'll talk more about Rock. Obviously, I want to get chat room comments on him. And we have Daniel Lee, by the way, in the chat says, The Rock dropped the final boss gimmick and just killed 2 potential WrestleMania main event feuds. LOL.
It definitely felt like they killed the Cody match. The like you kind of mentioned, the Roman match still feels like it's on the table.
Yep.
Maybe not as immediate as we maybe thought, but the Cody match feels dead, at least, coming out of tonight.
Yep. For sure. David Hager says Rock again proved to be worthless and stuck his nose way overboard, killing storylines he created and wanted 9 months ago. And then Junaid says, crowd was electric all night. The Rock acknowledging Roman as tribal chief and embracing Cody as if they have no history was weird, though. It was weird. Did you think the crowd was hot all night? And again, I think different speakers are going to tell a different story. I thought the announcers at times were saying the crowd was red hot, and I wasn't hearing a red hot crowd. I mean, to me, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, way more loud than what I heard tonight. But again, that's why I want to ask, because I don't necessarily trust speakers and sound mixing.
I thought that they popped for what you would expect them to pop for. Rock got a big reaction. Triple H or got a big reaction. Punk and Rollins seemed to, but I wouldn't say it was above the norm. It didn't feel like a particularly elevated crowd over, say, a normal TV event. But I didn't think they were bad by any means. It just nothing about them really stood out.
Yeah, I don't think anyone tuning in would go, what are the announcers talking about? This crowd's dead. But I also don't think some casual person tuning in who hadn't watched WWE for a while, my mom was watching it. She never watches wrestling. She's texted me. I've been flipping between shows, but I watched Raw a little bit. Like, a lot of casual people are going to be watching this because there's so much hype. I don't think they'd watch and go, whoa, this is a killer crowd. They're going, it's like overtime in Game 7 of an NHL playoff game. They're going nuts. It wasn't ever like that, I don't think. But it was good. It was a good crowd. They didn't make news either way, is my point. And I thought the announcers overstated the reaction a bit. But I mean, again, I don't fully trust that every speaker is going to capture the crowd in the same way with the mixing.
They also, something I did pick up on. They were not, and I don't know if this was just Netflix being super cautious for the first night out, given all the issues they had with the boxing, a couple months back. But they were also not pushing a 5.1 channel audio either. They sent a stereo mix. So I noticed my receiver was basically doing it itself. It was pumping noise into my surround speakers, but it wasn't coming from Netflix. So that was interesting because the cable feed of Raw traditionally did have surround sound audio.
Okay. Yep. All right. Well, let's pause. Let's formally introduce ourselves here. Big episode of Raw, and a lot to talk about. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show following the Monday, January 6, 2025 episode of WWE Raw, the first episode not on cable television and the first episode ever on a major streaming service, Netflix, and the first episode ever broadcast or streamed, I guess, globally live, which we heard a lot about. And we got a lot more to talk about on this post show. So many topics to get into. We're going to let callers in chat room and emails lead the way on some of it. We'll get to all of it. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show. I founded the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter when I was in high school in the late 1980s, and I have been doing it ever since. I did it throughout college. It was my job. The day I graduated, all my friends were dressing up in suits for job interviews, and I had this paper copy newsletter I'd been marketing through college, taking entrepreneurial courses and economics courses and accounting courses so I could run the business. I was learning as I went, and I've been doing it ever since for all kinds of generations and of technology. We had a 900 number for years so we could get people instant news. We've launched our website just over 25 years ago. We were a pioneer and a leader in terms of online premium pay service to provide next tier content online for a price when newspapers were way behind on this. Now it's just standard. I mean, people don't like paywalls, but it's how people like me can do what we do and put the time in that we do, and is having a premium level that our top supporters pay for. And we're still doing the print newsletter. It still goes out every week. It still gets mailed. It's still a family business. My mom, my son, my grandma was part of the mailing day way back in the day. It's been a long-running family business, and it is moments like this when I reflect, Brandon, on all the changes and how many it's so big right now. I was went out for drinks with some friends on Saturday night, and I was just talking about, they didn't know a lot about wrestling, but they knew it was kind of big. They knew about the Netflix thing. And I just said that WWE was once a pro wrestling business trying to become a global entertainment enterprise. And now it's a global entertainment enterprise that happens to have a pro wrestling product. Like, it is just TKO, Endeavor,
weirdly enough is embracing being a pro wrestling product for the first time in how many years?
Yeah. I mean, there comes a point where you get big and successful enough that you shed the stigma that you're trying to run from and you embrace it. Yeah. It also times out with wanting to run from Vince McMahon, which, by the way, not a mention of Vince tonight. Stephanie was shown in the crowd. I don't know if Stephanie's estranged from Vince, but I mean, everything I've heard in recent years is, they aren't tight, and there's been some public displays that point in that direction for sure. But she was at ringside applauding, and obviously she's married to Paul Levesque, who's a top executive on the creative side of things. It was just
Nikki Bella too, who had a pretty public departure from the company, and you wonder, was that Vince related? Yeah,
true. So it was weird having a big night like this with WWE and have no footage or mention of Vince. He was briefly shown on that USA Network tribute last week. What was I going to say about this? So it's like when there's kind of big landmark moments like this, I just think about all the different eras of wrestling, that I've had the privilege to cover as my career, my full-time job. And this is another big moment that makes me kind of think about how kind of cool it is to have been covering all. I mean, the WWE Network launch felt like it was going to be the biggest story. WWE going public felt like it was going to be the biggest story from a business side. There's a lot of tragedies and in-ring things that are huge too. There's so many categories to cover in the pro wrestling industry, but business-wise, this did feel big tonight. It felt slightly overhyped by the time the night was over, just slightly. But I was prepared for that. I sort of figured this would be not quite as. I thought there might be a couple angles that were bigger, but we still have a lot to talk about. So, Brandon LeClair, you are a PWTorch.com contributor. You are a host of Wrestling Night in America, our post shows following pay-per-views and PLEs. You write our PLE and pay-per-view reports alongside mine, usually on our website, PWTorch.com, and our ad-free version for the aforementioned VIP members and our premium tier who get the ad-free version with bonus content at PWTorchVIP.com. And you're also obviously frequently a co-host with me. Welcome to the co-host chair.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here for a big show. Certainly.
Yeah, it's great to have you. If you want to be part of the show, you can be a video caller. We limit that to our VIP members and Patreon supporters. On the VIP website in my TV report, I have the link if you want to be a video caller. So if you're a VIP member, go run over, log on to PWTorchVIP.com, click on my Raw report at the top and bottom. There's a link, and we invite you to be part of the show. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday live after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown on YouTube. Just search PWTorch on YouTube. If you're listening to us on the podcast side of things, which is where the vast majority of people listening to us are, because that's the audience we built up for 15 years. We're relatively new to doing live streaming on YouTube. We started doing that last year. So if you want to join us live, just search PWTorch on YouTube and subscribe to that channel. You can find the live stream. If you're discovering us on YouTube and you also listen to podcasts, it can certainly be easier when you're walking your dog or driving your car, whatever, to listen on the podcast feed. Search Wade Keller on your podcast app, and you'll see a red logo and a blue logo pop up. The red logo are the post-show formats. We include new shows and also some fun flashbacks. And the blue logo show is our main podcast, along with special episodes like pay-per-view previews, interviews. That's usually where we feature media Q&As and then some flashback episodes too. So subscribe to both. They're free. Just search Wade Keller. And while you're at it, search PWTorch. We have 2 other feeds that are free. The PWTorch Daily Cast, which features different hosts with different focuses, WWE, NXT, AEW, the 90s past cast, and more. That's Wrestling Night in Americas that we talked about a minute ago. And also the charcoal colored logo pops up. That's our PWTorch VIP free sample feed, which if you're on the Apple Podcast app, you can also unlock the full VIP feed using your Apple account. Real frictionless way to go VIP with our podcast there. You can also, if you're not a live caller, you can email us, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. That's a good way to participate in the show if you're not watching our show live, but you want to make the show and then listen to it later. And then the other way is just join us in the chat. And I threw some chats up there. It's a busy chat room tonight. If you really want to get our attention, because of how busy it is, super chats, I promise, we'll get to you swiftly. If you definitely want your comment, within reason, if it fits our format, read on the show and featured on the screen, you can do super chats. We invite you to do that. Okay. Let's so many directions to go here. I want to bring Javier Machado in. Javier, if you're ready for us, want to bring you in and get some quick thoughts from you. I don't know if you're going to stay off cam, which is fine if you are. But Javier, you've listened to us so far, PWTorch contributor and podcaster, host of Acknowledging WWE on the PWTorch Daily Cast feed. Javier, welcome.
Hey, Wade. Hey, Brandon. Nice to see you. I think this might be the first time I've seen your actual face.
Interesting.
Yeah. I just haven't. I haven't been watching. I just listened to my car, as Wade said.
Yep. Like most people do. I mean, I still do that.
Yep.
There's podcasts I listen to for my sports teams, and I know they have YouTube channels, and I don't know what they look like. I don't never tune in. I mean, and then there's other shows I watch on YouTube. It's weird how we, pick and choose, but whatever. Everyone subscribe to both. Just support us in every way you can. Go ahead, Javier.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've gotten used to is this, I've started pantomiming things while I'm on camera. And yes. I'm like, oh, I got to, yeah. But yeah, no, I enjoyed the show overall. Not having ads was great.
I had ads. Why didn't you have ads?
For reasons. Okay. I actually had no idea.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have a higher tier, you don't get ads, maybe.
By the way, when I logged on, it said you are now authorized to get live programming with ads. So I must have a tier.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I do use a VPN, but I'm in the US. It's logged on to the US. So it's not like I was doing it from somewhere else. So it was weird.
Javier, one thing, because I'll forget to say this, but I don't say it now. Netflix was great tonight, by the way. That you could start 5 minutes late, and you could start at the beginning, or you could start live. You could fast forward through commercials, which is nice. You could rewind, and the rewind function worked really well. There was a timestamp on the screen, which is really good for me because I'm trying to track the length of matches. And if I rewind to catch a comment or a spot, typing up my report at PWTorch, it's nice to have a timestamp and know exactly when the match started and where we are and kind of do the math to figure out the match length. That doesn't apply. Obviously, that's very special to me, but I appreciated it. I wasn't sure what we're going to get. And so, yeah, I felt like I had everything on my wish list was there. It was a smooth stream. We haven't heard a lot of complaints, but some people said there were buffering issues. My hunch is that's probably local Wi-Fi more than a Netflix issue. But functionally, it was great. It looked great, but they delivered. This was not a disastrous start. I know some people were worried after that boxing thing. How about for you, Javier?
Well, maybe it's because I didn't have the ads, but I did. There were a ton of moments where Cole was talking when they were playing like graphics and stuff, and then you would hear the first part, and then it cut out. Did you get that?
No.
Yeah,
I did not.
Yeah, I did.
Brandon, how was it for you, real quick? Just was it smooth?
Quality was excellent. My look of confusion is simply because I'm seeing a bunch of different people comment in the chat with various tiers of Netflix and whether or not they had ads. I have the highest tier of Netflix, the 4K premium, whatever, and I had commercials throughout the entire night, just like a regular Raw broadcast.
Yeah. So there's different.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, people have different experiences with that. Mike Good too in chat says I had ads with the highest tier, but I could fast forward if not live.
Yes.
Junaid said you had ads, Wade. I have Netflix Premium and I didn't have ads beside WWE in-house ads.
Yeah.
What Javier? What did you have when
he has an international feed? So they.
Well, no, because I'm actually watching off Netflix because I just don't know what tier I have because it was my Christmas gift for my brother. So he got me a subscription so I could watch Raw. So I don't know what tier it is. So I'm assuming it might be the highest tier, which is why I was not getting ads. But if I'm hearing some people with premium were getting ads, I don't know what happened. Now I do use a VPN, but I'm just logged into a regular US location, so it wasn't like it was, so it shouldn't. So it shouldn't have gotten.
So what was happening when they were in commercial break?
During the matches, you would get the matches. Although when they would come in, it would like pause. It would go black for a second, and then they would show you, the two people, like a graphic of the two people wrestling, and then the match would continue. I think that was when they were coming back from the break. Then during
well, go ahead. Sorry, Javier. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and then during the breaks, and obviously during the wrestling matches, the wrestling continued, and they continued calling the matches. Different from AEW because they actually continued calling the matches like normal. In AEW, when they do it, they usually just start joking around and like making fun of each other and not really calling the match. Which is I like that in AEW because it was like something different, but I actually see how much better it's in WWE because you don't break the stream of of consciousness of watching the wrestlers, and then during other periods there were promos where I forgot the who was doing the holding the mic. Sorry about that, but there was one with like the New Day, which was, and it kind of felt like kind of off the cuff. There was one with The Miz where they were talking about he was talking about John Cena, and then Karrion Kross came in to promote their match that they're gonna have a match with the Wyatt Six, and then Miz says, "No, I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore." And he goes, "Oh, I heard no." And he goes, "Aren't you this?" He said, "Yes." "Aren't you this?" "Yes." And the Miz, and they tricked the Miz to say yes. So he's like, "Oh, I guess I got to do it." So there were a couple promos that way. There was one with Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest, just talking about like what their match was. And the other thing that before a match started, which I assume was also going through break, was they would tell you they had like a video package of everything leading up to the match. I don't know if you guys saw that. So it would like basically gave you the entire history of the feud of Roman Reigns and Solo Sikoa, the entire history of the feud between Liv Morgan and with you voiceover and everything. So and then there was one where they actually showed behind the scenes footage of The Rock hugging Triple H.
Yeah, we got that.
Okay, so you got that one.
That was part of the regular broadcast.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that because was Cole speaking over those moments?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. In the Instagram stuff with Rock, he might have introduced it or thrown to it. I don't think he talked over it.
Because the one I saw was it seemed like he was cut off, just like it had happened several times, and it might have been during the times that we're going to, like, the inserted ads, because he would be talking and then it would cut off, and then and then like immediately, and then like you still get the videos in the package, whatever they're going to show, but. And you could tell he's supposed to be still talking because then it would come back in. You'll hear him say a couple words and then come back out.
All right.
That was
Javier. I want to move on.
Okay.
We got so much to talk about.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm curious what happened during the breaks, but I don't want to dissect when Cole. We have too much to talk about and it's late. and also I want to interject this. There is no pattern in the chat room, Javier and Brandon. Chris Johnson says, I have the lowest tier, no ads, and I'm in the United States. Acme Toon says, during the matches, I had no ads between matches, just WWE ads like PLEs. And Jason D said, no ads for international audience. I'd heard that going in. Cole did cut out a few times awkwardly, like his sentences got cut short. Yeah. And Junaid says, I use a VPN, so maybe that's the reason for no ads for me. Sadler version 3 says, I had no ads. I'm in Canada, though. And then Jake C says, I have the lowest tier, but I had ads, LOL. So anyway, there's all kinds of comments like that. I don't know. And I don't think we're going to figure it out tonight. Maybe
unless you're international, because they did say internationals were not getting. Okay. Just want to make sure that people who are saying that they didn't have ads, they were not international.
So my goal is to keep this show like under 4 hours. And I want to talk about, I want to spend at least an hour laughing at Hulk Hogan. So Javier, I want to get some bullet points from you. We got so many callers lined up. I won't keep you on for too long here. But
plus, I have my own show. I want to save stuff for that.
Yes. So Javier, what do you think of the show? You heard Brandon and me talk at the top. You in disagreement or in step with us? What do you think?
No, for the most part. I mean, it was kind of like a tale of two, kind of like almost like the Saudi shows, where like, part of it when they're just sticking to the wrestling stuff, it was really cool. When they got into the corporate stuff, like the opening promo with the Rock, I didn't like that like at all. Because he was breaking out of character. I am a lot more certain that it's going to be, this is leading to Rock and Roman for WrestleMania at this point. The hug and the I love you kind of like sells that, and I wouldn't be surprised if the January 27th thing is where things finally kick off with that. Yeah. With the interferences with Kevin Owens in the middle of the match. That first match was like. It was like a House of Torture match in New Japan with like all the crazy stuff going in. It worked better for the audience, and it did give you a good ending to it. I'm assuming that the main thrust of the Bloodline Civil War thing is probably going to be over from this point on, moving on to whatever they're going to do next, which again I assume is The Rock going into that. When they got really, like I'll let you talk about the Hogan thing later, but yeah, that whole thing, like it was like a Hogan like ad that was just, setting aside everything else, just, the fact that you had like someone come in and then just cut like a bad ad, promoting the Netflix, promoting, and it was just like so old school.
That Hogan launch went about as bad as the Lumi launch on, what's the show called that I'm, Industry that I'm watching right now. That's like practically as disastrous as that. Not a spoiler alert. It's just a subplot in the show.
But outside the self-congratulatory corporate BS, stuff. Once you set that aside, I really enjoyed it. And the thing is that like having The Rock open and having that spot with Hogan, it just screams to me someone in like Netflix corporate saying, hey, I remember these guys, let's get them. And it's how the show was sold, not really knowing, because I would have opened with Cody, open with someone who's new, and then if you want to have The Rock, have him come out then later. And again, if I followed closely the Rock story and, with the whole, act, with the WB and the stuff that he was doing as Black Adam, and it kind of feels like he's doing the same steps on that. Save that for another time, but yeah, it almost feels like him being the first one out kind of feels like more of a power thing. Plus, it was reported that he's got he has more shares now of TKO, and that was making the rounds in the stock thing. So outside of the wrestling circle. So again, it kind of feels like there might be some sort of power play that he's trying to pull off. But overall, once he set aside that, like I said, all that the matches were good. It remove all that, it kind of felt like a takeover to me.
Real quick, Javier, I know you want to talk about this on your podcast, Acknowledging WWE. People can listen to it later this week by searching PWTorch on their podcast app. Kevin Duncan will be back in the mix, it sounds like.
So he already told you. Okay.
Yeah, in rotation, yeah. So that is cool. For people who missed him, he had a hiatus, but he'll be back in rotation. So Javier, just tell me what you said you think Rock Reigns going to happen. What did you make of Reigns Cody? And then we'll probably leave it there and try to get to our callers.
Well, I agree with Brandon when you said that it feels like. I mean, I don't think it's like totally thrown out the window, the Reigns Cody thing, but it's definitely a pause button on that. It unless they're doing an actual like swerve and trying to get the people who read the tea leaves to quote unquote surprise them, which is always a horrible idea. It does feel like this is more like it's past. That's kind of part of the problem though is that didn't feel like you said, it didn't feel like it was The Rock cutting a promo. It was like Dwayne Johnson, the businessman who has got stock in TKO. And has got, or am I saying TKO correctly, or is it Endeavor? What's the name of the company?
And TKO is a subsidiary of Endeavor. Yeah.
Okay, so Endeavor's the big one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Endeavor. So it's what I meant to say. Endeavor.
That's
but
okay.
yeah. So that was like the whole. It could have been just that we're going to break storyline and just we'll like a meta thing. But I do think that that's them putting a pause on it, and that's going to be what comes down. If they're going to go to it, it's either going to go down the road, or it might be like, well, no, Rumble is KO. But I think that's a pause.
Did it seem like, and I think it's inherent in your answer, but do you think somebody who just follows storyline, you injected all kinds of other stuff that is sort of meta, business side, rumors, I heard this, I think that, but storyline wise, was this just a break in sort of canon and in sequence, or like, I mean, to have a love fest with Rock and Cody, is it like, oh, Cody is so happy with Rock because of that documentary that was put out on YouTube that showed that Rock was gracious enough to step down from a storyline that he forced and wedged himself into and thought would take over and be much bigger than Cody, and then was humbled and decided graciously to not get booed and harangued by fans anymore. And so now everybody's happy. Like I don't even know where what we saw tonight with Rock fits into the Cody storyline. Javier, give me your thoughts on that, and then Brandon jump right in when he's done.
I mean, canonically, two things. Either
canonically,
if you're following storyline wise,
I like that.
Okay,
I've never said the word before. I mean, it's fun. I like it. When I hear a word I like, I just can't help but repeat it if I can pronounce it.
You get the giggles.
I invented unabased last week on the Fix, which
yes, I saw. I was impressed. I was definitely impressed by that.
I was too.
I lost the train.
Did we thank Netflix yet? I want to thank the Netflix executives for helping us have our record audience tonight on our post.
Let's talk to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think in WWE canon, enough time has passed since the last WrestleMania that maybe they've mended fences behind the scenes, or he's The Rock is just putting on a false front. The thing is, it's kind of hard to tell with him nowadays whether it's a false front or it's the real him, and he's basically glad handing Cody to make it seem like everything's going on. Because I mean, when he came out with The Rock, that felt like more of a character work in terms of he hugs him. It feels like he was working The Rock. So I that's why it feels like that's going to be heading. And I think that him glad handing Cody is basically so he doesn't have to worry about Cody when he's going to go after The Rock would be my assumption. So, but yeah, that's kind of my overall thought how it fits in the canon of WWE.
How do you feel about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. I think that Rock, the fact that The Rock came back out later on in the show after the Roman Reigns match and did the stare down with him and the embrace and handing him the Ulafala, etc., that was clearly meant to represent storyline Rock. And so I think that's why in my head, I sort of chalked up that opening segment to just being Dwayne Johnson being the one to introduce this new era officially, even though Paul Levesque
he is
the
biggest star that, I mean, if you're a Netflix executive, whether they asked for it or demanded it or whatever, Rock is, I mean, say what you will about him, the biggest star on the show tonight.
Sure. And it felt a little out of place. Still, I mean, acknowledging that he is the biggest star and he's not a bad person to do it, I just wonder if there was another way to go about it. But it also, it felt like a show that Paul Levesque very carefully curated. And then this little segment was Dwayne Johnson coming in and saying, well, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, as careful as Paul Levesque is in curating his thoughts when he speaks about it's like a head coach with a star player who's acting up, and the head coach doesn't want to create trouble, and they're not playing defense, and they're not passing the ball, and they're pouting to the referees, and they're getting technicals, but the coach knows that the star player could probably get him fired, or even make life difficult for him. So he's got to parse his words carefully. That's when Paul Levesque talks about Rock. That's all I see. I mean, I could be projecting my own assumptions on things, but what I see is consistent with that theory and not entirely detached from what I hear. And so, but at the same time, if we're starting on Netflix and Rock's going to be a returning wrestler who is in main events, I mean, I am totally fine with him coming out in the first segment. I mean, I don't think could it, yes, could they have made a statement and Cody come out first or Roman Reigns come out first? Yeah. I mean, Rock and Reigns are standing in the ring. The crowd chanted OTC. I mean, that's Paul Levesque and everybody's like, okay, our audience, this is our fans. They're not here to see us. They're here to see celebrities, but they like Roman better than Rock, and they chanted OTC. They weren't chanting Rocky. I think they're secure in themselves. They're going to give Rock this moment. They know he's a big enough star. Probably, is going to make news and bring casual fans in. I don't think they want him bigfooting anything else, but I think as long as Levesque got to be on first and Rock second, I think they're okay with it. If they had gone Netflix Raw right to Rock's entrance, I think there'd be, but the fact that Levesque got to stand in the ring inside this giant weird tent and, introduce the show, at least he didn't get bigfooted. Brandon.
It just felt like Triple H, booked this show, had a really concise and clear plan in mind for it, and then had a little asterisk at the top of his run sheet that said, Dwayne's going to do something. It felt like it existed sort of in its own world. And I don't think that's necessarily a big deal for the reasons that you pointed out, Wade. It's just that I think that, if Paul had his way entirely, if he wasn't beholden to the folks at Netflix, to Dwayne Johnson, et cetera, I would think that he would have liked to have booked The Rock's appearance to come at the conclusion of the Roman Reigns match as a surprise at that point, and then you have the stare down between the two of them, instead of it being the second time you're seeing The Rock tonight already. You're muted.
Thanks. The amount of congratulating Netflix and pointing out the executives, I mean, it was a lot. Rodrigo Hernandez in the chat said, bloated show, all the self-congratulatory praise, the drone shots, the celebrities. It was too much. There's another comment or two about, Al Archer. The show was fine, but the self-fellatio is starting to leave a bad taste in my mouth. They need to get over themselves. It's quite the wording there. So anyway, I mean, that's a gist of it. There are people in the chat making those comments. Like, it was a little much. I mean, I was, there's some people texting me and chatting with me about that too. Just like, okay, we want to watch wrestling. We don't want to watch a bunch of rich celebrities talk about executives and podcasters and partners. Like, let's get on with it.
It also came in stark contrast to, because we just saw the NFL have its first games on Netflix on Christmas Day. And similarly, the broadcast went off without a hitch. Quality was great. Everything looked good. It gave me plenty of confidence that, they'd be able to pull this off with WWE. But Netflix was not front and center for the NFL. The NFL treated it like a normal regular season game broadcast. And I think that there's something to be said about being confident enough in your product that it is a privilege for you to be shown on this network, not the other way around. So there, for as big as WWE has gotten, and for as hot as the product is right now, there is still some of that, like, we've got to prove it. We've got to prove to you that we're big league, that we're mainstream entertainment, rather than something like the NFL where they come on Netflix for the first time and they're just like, yeah, this is business as usual.
Interesting comment, by the way. Darrell was watching the post show, and he says Roman kind of killed the Rock Roman thing in the post show tonight. He basically said it's more the fans who might want to have that match. That's interesting. I'd have to see the delivery and the tone to fully judge, but I don't get the sense that Roman is super excited to work with Rock. I mean, I know people would go, how could he not be? Rock is such a huge movie star, but Roman doesn't care about some of that stuff. He just wants to work with people he likes, who he can creatively feel that respect him and know their place, and to coin a phrase. And I don't think the creative synergy is there with Rock and a lot of people he worked with last year. Maybe this was his mea culpa or attempt to play nicer, or again, a lot of this can fit into storyline. Javier, do you want to jump in with anything else before we let you go? Either this topic or anything else quickly here.
Well, I mean, anything else you want me to hit on?
Oh no, anything else stand out for you? Don't worry about stealing thunder. Is there another talking point you want to sneak in, or do you just want to wait for your show?
No, I think I'll probably wait for my show.
Yeah.
I thought, like I said, overall fun show. And did I get that right? I do want to ask a question. Did I get that right? Is Logan Paul now full-time wrestler?
I mean, he was full-time. Last time he was full-time, but he wasn't full-time. You know, I mean, he was full-time. I mean, in WWE today, it doesn't mean you're doing house shows because they barely do house shows. So full-time just means I might have a title. I'm going to be on TV half the time and on more pay PLEs than not. I mean, that's full-time now.
Because I don't know if you saw this, because it might have been during ad time, because he said that this is no longer a side gig for me. This is actually my full-time job, something similar to those events.
I saw Jason Paul commented on that in his report over at ProWrestling.net, and he's like, he's a heel. I mean, he's saying stuff. He said it before. He said other things. It sounded to me like Logan, spewing, "Hey, I'm taking this place over." I mean, he said that before too, and then he left. So I don't read a ton into it, other than he's not here just for a cup of coffee, so to speak. I mean, this is another stint.
I mean, that's the only. Okay.
I did think it was curious that they didn't put him on the big screen, so the crowd didn't know the camera was on him, so nobody reacted.
Oh, interesting.
It's just silence when he was like pointing at the camera.
Oh, and you did mention the crowd, since you brought up the crowd. It felt like a Miami crowd whenever there's like a wrestling event down here, where like you get the pops and stuff when the wrestlers come out and they're big, But then like when the matches are happening, it all completely dies down. So it's like everyone's like paying attention. They're not yelling for the moves. They're not really like getting hyped for the matches. It felt like that kind of crowd to me, where they pop where they're supposed to pop, but like calm the rest of the way.
But yeah, I think that's what I felt. Yeah, there are moments, and then they settled in.
Yeah,
cool. Javier, great hearing from you. Everybody, check out his Acknowledging WWE podcast. It's part of the weekly PWTorch. It's one of the weekly PWTorch daily cast shows. It's the one focused on WWE with a range of a mix of different co-hosts, including Mike Myers and Kevin Duncan will be back in the mix. Your brother Javier. It's definitely worth listening to. You guys go in depth, and it's a different tone and cadence and side topics than what we do here. So I highly encourage people to subscribe. It's free. Search PWTorch on your podcast app. Anything else you want to add, Javier's, to plug your show?
No, just Happy New Year, everybody. I haven't said that on the show, so
yes,
have a good.
Excellent. Thanks. All right. Javier Machado leaving us now, which allows us to bring a caller into the show. We'll bring Andy from Houston, and he was first in line, so we're going to go to him first here.
Put me second in line.
Okay, we'll do that then. So we'll go to Chris C. Chris C., welcome to the show. You are audio only, or camera's off, which is totally fine. Welcome. What's on your mind about Raw on Netflix tonight?
Hey, Wade. Hey, Brendan. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
For sure, yeah.
Won't take up too much of your time. I really wanted to put the focus on something that hasn't been covered yet, and that's Gunther. I thought it was a big mistake by them not to highlight him in some way, shape, or form. He's a rising star, and that title really needs a lift. So the fact that you have the women's title, it's such a big focus tonight, and you fail to barely even mention Gunther, I thought was a dropped ball by the WWE.
Brandon, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to only give him that promo video, which for what it's worth, I thought the promo package was good. But I do think that he's a guy who you've invested so much into this point, and he is your world champion of the Raw brand, at least for the time being. I mean, it feels like maybe they might be making a switch sooner rather than later, and maybe that's why they opted not to feature him tonight. But I think that it would have behooved them to include him in front of the live audience, or at least, a backstage interview, something more than the pre-recorded video. It was curious, though, and Dan from Chicago in the chat just mentioned this too. When John Cena was running down lists of potential opponents, Gunther received a pretty lukewarm, at best, reaction, which was curious and disappointing, especially given that he's the world champion right now. I know that there were a lot of big names mentioned in that group, but still, I mean, as the current world champion and someone who's been heavily pushed and well pushed, you would think that there would be a better reaction there. So, yeah, I mean, not a great night for the world title, or for Gunther, but I assume that they will get him more involved next week when we start having a more regular format. Tonight was very much a different format than we're used to seeing. It was run closer to, I think, the PLE style than it was traditional WWE TV.
Yeah.
But I do think it was a missed opportunity for sure.
So I'll be a little more accepting of it, and I'm a huge Gunther fan. I think one, they messed with his character. They teased babyface-ish turn, and there's, I think, some ambivalence. What is he? And then he was annoyed by fans patting him on the shoulder when for a couple weeks before that, it seemed like they were going a different direction with him. So I just, I don't know. I think fans are just like, well, he's a star, but I don't have strong emotions about him anymore because WWE's been all over the map with him. And it's an argument against doing too many shades of great characters, even though a lot of people push back on me on that. I just think it's a fantasy that isn't applicable and leads to ambivalence in crowds. And wrestling is not Breaking Bad or The Sopranos or Succession. It's not built around one or a small group of conflicted characters who are a mix of a lot of different things that, scripts that are poured over for months for every 44 minutes that gets pumped out by HBO or Netflix. That's just not wrestling. Wrestling's live crowds and people passionately reacting one way or the other. And I think they messed up Gunther in that way. Even if they hadn't, though, I think Gunther isn't yet at a level where it seems like the show should be built around him. Now, that said, had they, I would have been for it. But the absence of it, I don't think should be seen as anything but a verification of where he is, not where he can be in 1 month or 8 months. But they did not use tonight to say, this is somebody who is a top 3 or 4 star with us. He got a vignette. It was, vintage Gunther, but this was not like, let's open Netflix with him or let's feature him in a main event, and they're not there with him yet. And I don't know if they're wavering or it's also, there's a lot of calendar booking in WWE when it comes to gimmick matches, but there's also calendar booking when it comes to pushes. Sometimes it's just not in the cards. There's only so many people that can push at one time on one premiere episode on Netflix or in a lead up to PLEs. And he doesn't have that program right now. And they have enough other people sort of ahead of him in seniority and crowd investment. So I wouldn't read it as a negative. I just think for people who want to see him get elevated, it was a missed opportunity to do that, but I don't think you should be worried about him either.
I would say too, I mean, I haven't actually done the math on this, but like if you were to look at the totality of seconds that they were featured, I think Gunther probably got more TV time than Cody did. Cody just happened to be in the building.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was 3 hours and a few minutes. It was not a show that they put everybody on, and they need, other people need their moments. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to critique the show. I mean, they could have done more shorter matches and not had it be as PLE oriented. Obviously, The Rock could have talked less, and not belabored the congratulating Netflix and aren't we big and isn't this global? That was a little much. So yeah, you could have done something with Gunther, but I don't know. I mean, I'm okay with it. Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and I agree with most of what you guys said. I think his lack of character definition, he's not the same Gunther we saw versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania, and I think that does hurt him to an extent. But I think it's all the more reason they need to give him more time. And even the title, I mean, that title still is viewed as the little brother title, and I think it could have been used more strategically. I know they have it on Gunther now, but I could imagine that main event if the title had been on Seth and CM Punk is facing Seth for the title and he wins in this big moment. I mean, that's a really a big moment for that title and a big Raw. So I just feel like there's a lot of capital right now that wasn't used in the right way, and that's just, you know, two examples of it.
JC Scooby says WWE is slowly ruining Gunther now. They never learn. It's something would be doing. I think it means something Vince would be doing. Goodfella 1422 says Gunther will have Punk and Cena chasing soon. He'll be fine, and he'll beat the brakes off of them. And
I really do wonder.
Oh, real quick, Junaid says, I thought Gunther would probably interrupt Cena when they were talking about the World Championship. So there's Junaid suggesting a way that he could have been involved. And one more, Sadler Version 3 says, Gunther's reaction didn't surprise me considering the celebrity crowd. Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I really do wonder, too, if there was just a focus on trying to largely focus on wrestlers who they have as part of the long-term plan for Raw on Netflix, because it does feel like Raw is shifting back into the primary role, whereas for the last several years on Fox, they considered SmackDown the A show, and that typically had the larger of the two titles. I would expect that Cody's title will move to Raw and Gunther's will move to SmackDown.
Yeah.
And so if they're planning to send Gunther to SmackDown anytime soon, they might not want to put a ton of focus on a guy who's just not going to be on Netflix all that much.
Yeah. All right, Chris, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. I won't take up any more of your time. Thanks, guys. I appreciate everything you do, and have a good night.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. You too. All right, let's one I mentioned earlier, a VIP membership. I'm just going to throw the graphic up for our YouTube viewers. It's a great time to become a VIP member. You can go about it a few ways. One, search PWTorch VIP in Patreon or Spotify, and you can get a 7-day free trial. We've had more people taking advantage of this as I've been mentioning it more often. Patreon in partnership with Spotify, you can get unlock our VIP shows, which, by the way, includes ad-free versions of our free shows like this one. So you get a streamlined listening experience without the commercial breaks. They're just skipped right over. We don't do video packages during commercials for VIP members. It just jumps right past them. And yeah, you unlock everything with Rich and Wade, The Fix that I host with Tom Martin every week, Ellen Forrell's Pro Wrestling Paradise, Greg Parks Out Loud, the Wade Keller Hotlines, including my start-to-finish recaps of Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night. A lot of people listen to those. VIP members listen to those before listening to the post show if they don't see the TV show, because then they get a full 15, 20, 25-minute rundown of the show. Also, our post pay-per-view and PLE event roundtables that we run right after PLE events and pay-per-views for VIP members. Our PWTorch VIP podcast vaults are fascinating. I think I found it fascinating because it's been 18 years since I listened to some of these. And our Bruce Mitchell audio shows, pay-per-view roundtables, Real Deal with Pat McNeil, Wade Keller Hotlines with a ton of backstage news. We've now entered the year 2007, going back 18 years, and we just marched through what our VIP members back then, 18 years ago, were listening to that week. And we have separate feeds now, so you can get all the current shows or all our podcasts about current events on a separate feed from all of our best of shows and look back shows and nostalgia shows. You can combine them all into one, but we've sorted them into two groups too, if you might listen to them at a different pace. So one way to sign up is through Patreon or Spotify, PWTorch VIP, get a 7-day free trial. Another good way to go VIP is the main way, through a full VIP membership. Full details on that at pwtorch.com/govip. Credit card, debit card, PayPal. You can unlock not only our VIP podcast feed that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, the native app, and CarPlay. No advanced settings, no passwords to enter. We have a really slick setup. You get an email, you click it, you're in. And that also unlocks the ad-free website with 35 plus years of archives, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s, some that I hosted on KFA and radio in the early 90s, and our full podcast lineup dating back over 20 years, plus the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, the PDF and all text version of it that comes out every week with exclusive columns. Lots of great stuff. pwtorch.com/govip. Full details on that website. That'll tell you all about the various ways to sign up. All right. We have mid-show our new Raw logo showing up. Thanks to Corey for that. We had the old logo, and now we've got our new overlay with the new Raw logo. So mid-show, look at us being all up to date. All right. Reminder, if you're a VIP member, Patreon supporter, you can be a video caller still. You can get in line in the waiting room. But we're going to go to Andy in Houston, who was number 1. He chose to be number 2 instead. Andy, welcome. Good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first times I've done the face-to-face with the live cast here. So
it's
pretty
on the
fun.
Wade Keller post show, yeah.
I definitely share your sentiment about just those feelings of vindication, hearing the crowd boo Hulk Hogan when he started talking, and then trying to be like, "Buy my beer, brother." It's like, what? When did he get into beer? I mean,
last year.
Well, it just feels like anything that Hulk Hogan does, the brand doesn't fit the character as far as the type of things he promotes or sells these days.
Yeah, I was so like, I spoke out against the whole initial campaign because there was the whole, Bud Light controversy because they dared show in their commercials people who were not cisgender mixed gender couples, and they were actually showing ads that like represented people you see walking down the street in cities and small towns in America. And somehow that became controversial and pushing some overly progressive liberal agenda. And so they took Bud Light took a ton of heat for it. And so Hogan took advantage of that and said, we're not going to be political. Like, how is it political just putting in ads a cross-section of the real life experience of Americans? And somehow he was trying to capitalize on that by saying we won't be political, which I asked, does that mean your beer commercials will only be straight couples who are white or straight couples who are black, but no mixed race, and we can't have gay couples, and certainly no one who's transgender, and on and on. Like, what does it mean you're not going to be political? Because, by the way, if all you do is run a commercial that would have been on 1960s television but not 2024, you're being political. And you're also, well, whatever, I won't go there. So I thought this was fraudulent from the beginning, and it was just so transparent. He was trying to act like, I'm not going to be political. But what he's saying is, I want life to go back where people aren't in a straight, same, whatever relationships to go back into hiding. And that's,
you can't speak at the RNC and then claim to have a non-political product to sell.
And that was all before he came out so much, but I think it was a tell. That's where his mindset was, and that's who the beer was being marketed to. But really, I mean, obviously he'll take a spotlight in a cheering crowd, but he got a spotlight, but not a cheering crowd tonight.
So I was going to point out, I don't know if y'all could tell, but it seemed like the red lights were masking a lot of empty seats that you could see with certain camera shots. Did they say that it was a sold out arena?
Any empty seats you saw were people in the concourse. It was a 100% legit. WrestleTix verified.
Okay.
Now you might have noticed things I didn't, and maybe Brandon, you might chime in on this. It's possible they distributed tickets, and it's LA. People showed up late. People didn't show up. People left early. They saw the Raw. I don't know that, but they did not slash ticket prices. They had a late big walk up. WrestleTix independent support WrestleTix, by the way. They do great work tracking ticket sales. And they verified, like, they had 17,002 tickets distributed and a capacity of 17,009. So they had like at one point 7 seats not sold, which obviously they ended up selling. So my hunch is the empty seats were just an illusion, possibly, or even more so, just people wandering the concourse or something. Brandon, did you notice that?
Yeah, on a couple of occasions. One, I would say, in these large markets, LA, New York, etc., there's always going to be a pretty large congregation of resale tickets that were purchased by various, scalpers, bots, whatever the case may be. And those, WrestleTix can't account for those that did not sell on the secondary market. So if they sold from the original box office, they may not have sold on the secondary. So it is possible that there were seats that were not filled, but WWE got paid for those seats because they were bought initially.
Good point,
What I did notice, Andy, was a lot of that front and second row opposite or on the hard cam side was empty throughout most of the night. And they didn't seem to mind showing that. And that was where they were like rotating celebrities and special guests in and out. I think some of the Netflix people sat there at one point. That whole row was almost empty, like at the start of the Punk and Rollins match. And then it looked like they moved some people in, maybe from the top, because they looked like regular fans, not like, Netflix people or industry people. So I'm not sure if they moved some people down at the end of the show, but those chairs were used for like rotating guests throughout the night.
Okay, cool.
By the way,
I guess
Andy, I'll throw this in because it was a super chat and I promised to throw them up. He's been did this a while back. Sad seeing Hogan nothing but himself to blame, says Jake from Windy City. Thanks for the super chat, Jake. Anyone else who wants to for sure be on the show, because we have a lot of chat room activity tonight. I won't get to all of them. Super chats are always welcome. It's a good way to support us and get your comment on the air. I assume a little sarcasm was sad seeing Hogan. Although if you were a Hogan fan, I mean, I was a kid supporting Hulkamania in the AWA. I was like long before doing the Torch, years before doing the Torch. I was like, Hulkamania was born on my TV screen in the Minneapolis St. Paul market in the AWA before he went to the WWF, and was part of a huge surge in attendance and those Nick Bockwinkel matches and battle of words with Jesse Ventura and all that. That was a lot of fun. It is sad seeing what he's become. And by the way, he was really wobbly on his feet. I've never seen him physically look so old. I mean, it happens. It's human. It's a human arc on Earth, but he put his body through a lot, and also his skin through a lot of tanning, and he looked old, and that had to be jarring for him to deal with that, Andy.
Well, at least he's not pulling a Ric Flair saying he might have one last match left in him. So.
I don't think he's ever done a promo and not said he might have one more in him, but I think the booze would have stopped and people would have just laughed, and that would have been even more embarrassing. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Hogan. I shouldn't say. I'm understating it. I have no sympathy for Hogan. You know, he got a windfall of money through a lawsuit, and fair enough, the courts decided that. But the stuff he said about black people when he was in his 50s that came out, that he talked about to his son, and then his lack of contrition, his lack of an actual full-fledged, believable public apology that showed any awareness of it, and then tweeting all these, black fans and Hulkamania t-shirts on Twitter for years as if that was some proof that he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, I know a lot of people, rightfully so, are just done with him because of that. And you can have plenty of reasons to be done with somebody you think is hanging around too long, or you didn't like him anyways, and you were a Flair person. But in real life, Hogan's, given plenty of people some real legit reasons to be happy tonight with the crowd reaction.
Now, if they had been self-aware enough, they could have had New Day backstage with him talking about how much they like his beer to get mega heel heat. But that's just...
I don't think... Brandon, do you think they were expecting that response for Hogan? Do you think Hogan was?
No, I don't. I don't think Hogan is self-aware enough to know that to believe that he would ever get booed in a scenario like that.
Yeah.
I think this even just goes far beyond, what Hogan has done and said over the years and all the reasons why, he doesn't deserve this platform. Like, he just doesn't bring anything to the table anymore. I mean, wrestling has moved on from Hulk Hogan. They're not interested in him anymore. I just don't know what positives you get out of parading him out there. I mean, they've seen year over year diminishing returns on each one of his appearances. And I mean, even if you set aside all of the negativity and all of that stuff, if you just completely write that out of the equation, I just don't think that there is an audience for Hulk Hogan in pro wrestling anymore. The people who are still interested in Hulk Hogan have either moved on or are getting their dose of Hulk Hogan from other avenues. They don't need to see him come out on Raw and make a fool out of himself and sell his next grift. Absolutely.
Yep. Also, some people in the chat commenting on Hogan. Let me bring this one up here. This is not real. Says, listen up, brother. If you're going to be racist, make sure no one's recording you. Better off just don't be racist. But you know what? If you're going to be racist and you're recorded, you're going to have to live with the complications of it. And I don't know. I mean, WWE and, having this partnership with him is, it's not going well. And if you're the beer company partner, you're going, wait, what? I thought Hogan was the most popular wrestler of all time. JC Scooby 1976 says Hogan was booed at WrestleMania when in Tampa Bay when all the racist stuff came out. Absolutely. Derek Mitchell says, Wade, I'm with you. I used to watch Hogan in the AWA, but he's become a disgrace. Efren with a super chat. Efren, welcome to the show. Good, early caller on the PWTorch daily cast back in the day, especially on the flagships with Jason Powell and me. Jason will be with me tomorrow on the flagship, so be sure to listen to the Blue Show tomorrow night. Wade Keller is the search term, and subscribe to the Blue Show or go VIP. It'll be on your feed. He says, more AWA Keller stories. I love them. I mean, we all have a fondness for the first wrestling we saw, unless there's a couple years here and there where you might not have a fondness for it. But I had a great stretch of AWA wrestling to to look back on and appreciate. Fan Blast says partnering with Hogan's Beer Company was an unforced error. Well, I mean, it's hard to turn down money. Do you think Andy, the beer company, second guessing the Hogan Alliance at this point? His partners
only as much as Saudi Arabia is second guessing their Royal Rumble they get next year.
Yeah, that's news.
I don't want to touch that topic too much right now because that's another long discussion in itself. But I'll just touch on 2 or 3 other small points. I guess. Yeah, I had the same experience as you did with having commercials. And so it just felt like a regular Raw show. So in that respect, it didn't seem like there was any real distinction of Raw being on Netflix except for that self-promotion of, hey, we're on Netflix. Everybody has Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
But, other than that, there was nothing special. Despite all the celebrity flaunts. I mean, we had celebrities back during the special GM every week on Raw. So nothing really distinct in that respect.
Yeah. Some of it was just cross-promoting Netflix shows too, which is fine. I mean, that's, there's synergy there.
So the other thing tonight really, the main event really highlighted what I know you and Todd have sort of kick the dead horse about, where just repeated use of finishers over and over, people kicking out of them, and it needs to be heavily reduced. Not even so much of Cody doing 3 crossroads before a pin, but just doing a finisher outside the ring, then doing it in the ring. And we're not at WrestleMania, and people are still kicking out after just taking all this punishment. But I will give props to Punk for the way he sold doing the 2 go to sleeps. That finish was really nice.
Brandon, we haven't talked about the match. There's actually wrestling on the show, and a big match that was built up for a very long time. I feel bad we're well over an hour into the show, and we're not talking about the actual wrestling match outcomes too much. But WWE, whatever. That's just how it goes. So yeah, what'd you think of that? What'd you think of the main event? And what do you think of what Andy said in particular too, the kicking out finishers?
Yeah, I'm with you, Andy, on both points. I think that there needs to be definitely a stop, or at least a pause on the number of finishers being used in major matches. It's a problem in WWE. It's a problem in AEW. It's just it's a symptom of pro wrestling right now. It's the style that has become popularized. Usually WWE is a little bit better about cultivating when it happens. They usually save it for the bigger shows. And so I guess, if you want to consider this a bigger show, then that's why they busted it out. But to me, it was still, an episode of TV. I certainly could have done without it here. I liked the match, but that was a detraction for me, simply because it's not the style that I look for. But I do think that the finishing sequence, like you said, with Seth kind of falling into Punk's hands, was really, really well done. I liked the bulk of the match and thought that they worked really hard. They worked really snug. The first 3 or 4 minutes, you were they were going at each other hard enough for you to be like, there's a little bit of real animosity here. Nobody was really pulling those shots. And that was good. I mean, there's obviously some real tension and history there between Punk and Seth, and they played into it, had a super professional match while still, beating up on each other a little bit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah. I thought that it worked well for what it needed to do. Seth's facial expressions at the end were really good. Had a little blood there from that last GTS, which was just a good closing shot. So yeah, I mean, not super noteworthy, but I thought they just, 2 really, really good wrestlers just wrestling a good match.
Yeah.
I thought the Michael Cole commentary, using Seth's government name, as we say now, and telling the story in detail. He drove across the country to go to Punk's training camp, and he blew Punk away with his athleticism and potential, but he didn't have the money to wrestle, and giving a little more granular detail to what they referred to in their promo exchange, and and said then Seth was his mercenary, but then Punk quit, and Seth carried WWE on his back for 10 years. And then when Punk came back, big money, a lot of people embracing him in the back and crowds, and that upset Seth. I mean, he built, I thought it was a good summation of the story for the uninitiated who weren't seeing video packages. And WWE, by the way, had 3+ hours. They didn't do a lot of PLE style video recaps. In that sense, this was different than a PLE. I mean, we got it there was a Logan Paul, at the Netflix pre-show thing at WWE headquarters that they did last month, but they didn't do much in the way of video packages. They wanted to keep the camera live on the ring or live on celebrities at ringside or luxury suites or little backstage segments, but we didn't get a lot of like pre-recorded content other than what apparently some people saw instead of commercials. Brandon, what did you think about the framing of Punk, Seth in particular?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Seth seemed to lean into being the heel in the match. I mean, there was clearly no attempt to turn him or make you feel like this was a long-term thing, but it did feel kind of like Punk was clearly working the babyface role and Seth was the more aggressive of the two. He was the one that was initiating a lot of the contact and action outside of the ring and really begging the referee not to count. So I thought that was an interesting point. But just as far as presentation goes for the major matches, I do wonder, I think Javier might have mentioned this earlier, that they did do some promos in between for when the three of us got commercials and other people were not getting those breaks, which would be similar to the PLE strategy, because if you're a premium subscriber, you get the ads, and Premium Plus, you get the video packages. So they might have done that. I just can't verify because I was one of the people who had commercials.
Quick news item, and I'll throw back to you, Andy. Darrell, who was watching the WWE post show, said that he's thinking about changing his finisher, which is interesting. And in the chat, This Is Not Real says, if Punk is going to change his finisher, I really hope he isn't going to choose some MMA submission like Undertaker.
Go back
did.
to the Anaconda Vice.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why he started using the go-to sleep, because having that submission finisher like one of his idols, Bret Hart, seemed to really fit his character for the bulk of his WWE career. I guess WWE just really wanted to lean away from submissions actually finishing matches.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not doing someone else's move and having them kick out of it. I just don't think you want to do that very often, because the idea is your finisher is something you've refined, you've perfected. There's a reason you use it instead of other moves, because it fits your and ostensibly it's because it fits your physical abilities better. If you're really strong, you might do a running power slam like Dr. Death Steve Williams. But if you're high flyer, you use a top rope move. If you've got great knee strikes, you would do a go to sleep. Whatever so when other wrestlers do someone else's finisher, it's sort of baked in. It's almost like you're trying to get under their skin, but you're not a specialist at it. And so I'm saying you shouldn't do it a lot, but when you do it, when the other wrestler kicks out, in my mind, that's sort of baked in. Well, it's not your specialty, so it's not as effective if someone else does it, and you're doing it more to kind of try to beat them with their own finisher. It's like trying to beat, the Golden State Warriors of the past 10 years with 3-point shooting. It's like, well, we're going to beat them out of their own game and humiliate them even more. Fine, but if you overdo it, it takes away some of the specialness that they are specialty moves for each person, and it is kind of spamming finishers, as somebody put in the chat.
AEW has done a bit of a better job there. When they do have wrestlers use other people's finishers, commentary is usually quick to point out that it's not their move. They don't do it as well as the other guy, and so that's why it didn't score a 3 count.
That's good. Yep.
It didn't necessarily bother me that Cole didn't do that tonight, because WWE very rarely does the finisher stealing thing. But if they're going to, I would like that explanation on commentary. I think it helps.
Yeah, anytime you can explain something that gives viewers a story to believe in. That's here's the rules of engagement. It's a fictional world. You get to decide what counts and what doesn't. There's certain things we have to ignore in order to not just go crazy watching this stuff. But as long as you're consistent and you find opportunities to kind of explain that, I like that. I mean, there's commentators over the years who would have, specialized in doing that. It's like Nick Bockwinkel, speaking of the AWA, when he did color commentary, he'd always look for opportunities to kind of explain the wrestler's mentality about why they do certain things in a certain way. And there's other commentators over the years who have done that too. Want to jump in with Anthony Foster in the chat. He goes, every match had finisher spamming. 2 with no rules, and the main event bent the rules too. On CM Punk, Dan from Chicago says, I've generally been a Punk fan over the years, but wrestling has never been his strong suit. His work in this match showed his age. I found it tough to watch. Andy, what do you think of Punk's work now compared to what would be considered his prime physically?
I would definitely say it's a slower pace and certainly not as crisp as it was 10 years ago. But I mean, that makes sense considering the tricep injury on each arm that he's had. So doing a lot of upper body moves is not going to be in the cards for him. The fireman's carry for the go to sleep is really all legs and no arms for what he's doing. But I've never had an issue with him like losing a step because his ring psychology is still better than 95% of the roster when it comes to telling a story in the match and reacting to what gets done to him, like his ability to sell. So that hasn't lost a step.
Yeah, there's some wrestlers when they just can't physically do what they could do, or they're that step slower, so to speak. It's going to really stand out. Like who is Will Ospreay if he can't be who he is?
Yeah.
So I think that Rey Mysterio is an example of somebody who adjusted, and there's things I saw him in Tijuana, Mexico, in person once do things that just blew my mind when he was 20ish years old. And he's not doing 99% of those things anymore, but he's still super popular, and he's, a smarter worker and makes his moves count and knows, even with a mask on, how to make everything count. But some clarification, by the way, Durrell says, he was saying he's thinking about changing the finisher, and this is his first time taking his own finisher, so he gets to see how it feels. And Danny Tuchito says, to be clear, Punk said that during the presser in the context of saying he's never had to take it from someone else before and it hurt. Both did look pretty stiff.
That second one was snug.
Yes.
And it was so snug that they were able to show the replay in slow motion and not speed it up at the end. So that's when it was snug.
Yes, totally true.
It kind of looked like Punk was lowering his head purposefully into the knee to connect. So, or maybe he just didn't anticipate the landing.
There have been moments when Seth and Punk have gone at it, and I've thought plausible deniability, but maybe laying it in. I mean, it's fun. I mean, it would be unprofessional if that was actually happening, but it's kind of fun to watch two people. And like I joked, maybe they're exchanging Wordle scores at 12:05 a.m. every night, and they're best friends, and they've put their differences behind them, and they're texting buddies. But maybe they're not, and maybe there's still tension there, and maybe there's, Punk's trying to be on his best behavior, and Seth's trying to push his buttons physically in the ring.
It looked like Punk had words for him at the end of the match. I assume positive, but he turned to him and tucked his head in.
I mean, again, every report is Punk has been gracious and professional and cool and like a model wrestler in the locker room, in NXT, and in WWE. I've heard no stories about him. I've asked every once in a while, not like fishing for a negative story, just been texting with people in the company. I'm like, is everything still good with Punk? Any warning signs? And I was like, no, he's been great. So hopefully he and Seth him and anyone else have buried the hatchet, and I'd rather have fake discord and real harmony in wrestling. We do good numbers when there's real discord, but I'm not rooting for it. It's just inevitably going to happen. This is not real. So it's part of the problem with the GTS is you have to lift them up, and Punk is aging. Just if he thinks he physically is looking like he can't do it anymore, it's time to switch. Ricky Steamboat was doing a top row cross body block, and he got older and he started doing a chop where he landed on his feet and chopped people in the head. People adjust as they go. Andy, anything else quick before we get to our next callers?
I was just going to say, watching the Seth Rollins interview on YouTube yesterday, it really seemed like the way he was dialing back on some of the vitriol against Punk, that tonight was the end of their feud right now. So I'm just curious what you guys think is next for Punk, if he maybe can finish his story of his desire to main event WrestleMania through a Royal Rumble win, or if you think the field is too open and he's not going to be the top prospect. And I'll just leave you guys with that, and you'll have a great night.
Great. Andy, don't wait for the next huge moment in WWE history to join us.
Will do.
Thanks. So, yeah, we haven't gotten to the John Cena promo yet. Him throwing his name out there in the Rumble. He went, I mean, it was, we'll talk about him. Let's stick to Andy's question. CM Punk, Gunther. I like that. I don't know. It doesn't have to happen soon. It can take, we can do other things too. There's still, people thinking Punk's going to turn heel with Heyman on Roman, especially if Roman's moving on from the Bloodline storyline. Yeah, what do you think? I mean, Punk got a win here. I'm not surprised. I think Punk should get a win. I think if he loses at his age with his time off, it greatly cuts into people perceiving him as WrestleMania main event world title contender worthy. So I just think it was the right move, and I think Seth is fine. I mean, but you can tell the story just like they did with Gunther when he lost to Cody. You can tell the story of Seth, snapping, losing it, whatever. So yeah, your thoughts on Punk's future, but also Seth's, Brandon.
Yeah, I think that they telegraphed that this was the end in a way tonight. I mean, there was sort of that stare between the two of them. They didn't quite acknowledge any sort of respect, but the post show, I caught the first 30 seconds or so of the post show, and Seth kind of hung around, rolled to the outside, and was kind of dejected, looking on, and Punk was sort of licking his wounds in the ring, but kind of staring down Seth. So it was kind of like that, the respect without the respect thing. I think that getting a big win over Rollins here in the main event of the first show on Netflix, to me, feels like an indication that they're moving on to bigger things for Punk, and I do think that at some point there is going to be a world title feud in there, whether that's Gunther now or down the road. As for Seth, it's a little bit harder to predict, I think. I mean, he's going to be in a bit of a strange situation here, not unlike he was heading into last year's WrestleMania, without like a really clear direction. Of course, like last year it was because Punk got hurt. And this year it just doesn't feel like there's something lining up for him the way that you would hope. So I'm not sure. I would certainly err against the idea of turning either of them heel at this point. I think that Seth is still really, really over with the crowd. He's turned very, very frequently. I think keeping him in this role for the time being is probably the way that you want to stick. And he's also found himself as a babyface for really the first time. So I don't think you want to give up on that just yet. And then Punk, Punk's a great heel, but man, the crowd loves him, and he's consistently getting the biggest reactions on the majority of the show that he's featured on. I mean, tonight, like you could call him, I think, probably number 3 behind Rock and Roman, and Roman. I think a lot of that has to do with just how little people see him. So I would say I would err against trying to turn him right now, especially when if you turn him, Wade, like you mentioned, it seems most likely that he would be teaming with Paul Heyman opposite of Roman Reigns. And to me, that feels like playing with fire. You have a newly minted Roman Reigns as a babyface, and you're going to turn one of your most popular baby faces, I mean, maybe second only to Roman Reigns, or they're 1A, 1B, and Cody Rhodes is 1C. They're all right there. I just don't think that you want to play with that fire in the event that you turn him, you put him against Roman, and the crowd just cheers him anyway and starts to boo Roman again. Now that you've just put in 5 years of work to get Roman Reigns cheered, I just wouldn't do it right now.
Yeah, this maybe the safer route is exactly what you're describing, or avoiding what I not pitched, but was saying could happen. By the way, Derek Mitchell says, I heard CM Punk on Shannon Sharp Nightcap show last night. He said he doesn't envision this feud with Seth Rollins ending anytime soon. So sometimes it seems like a feud's over, and then, I was going to say then the next night on Raw. Well, this was Raw, but, the next week on Raw, boom, there's some big angle. And we didn't get a clarity.
And if you're Damian Priest in the Judgment Day, then it's just it's perpetually, forever and ever.
Oh, totally. Well, maybe it ends next week. It's on
probably not.
Week 2. No, probably not. So yeah, there could be an angle next week or the week after or something in the Rumble. They could, reignite it. We'll see. Okay, let's we haven't talked about the Cena promo yet. Maybe our callers will. Let's go to Rivers next, and then we got Sean in Tennessee and Jason in Australia also on deck. Rivers, welcome. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind about Raw tonight?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
I just thought, could I mention just a few aesthetic changes that they made to get your guys' opinion?
Yeah, for sure.
First, I want to talk about the crowd. I feel they let me down a little bit. I live in Los Angeles, but it's not a surprise. LA crowds are what I would call enthusiastically casual or casually enthusiastic, in that we will pop for big things, but the bread and butter of whatever it is that we're watching, we are too cool to react to it. We don't want to show any sort of emotion. We're the same with music, sport, and comedy, so it's not a surprise. But they did make up for it when they booed Hulk Hogan, because they didn't have to, because it's been a trend recently of we just cheer who is a babyface, we boo heels.
That's true.
But they made a special case to go against that and be like, no, screw this guy. And I will say as well, I don't think it's entirely political, because Undertaker got a pretty good cheer. I mean, there was no boos for Taker, so I think it's just a lot of things. And I was proud of LA for that. So the first thing is the announce table, the new announce table, does not look like it breaks. It is thick, and I'm hoping that maybe there's a hold on putting people through announce tables for the foreseeable future. So when it does happen again, let's say in a couple of years, it becomes a big deal again. I was just wondering if you think that was part of the plan, or do you think this table is breakable, but just not tonight?
I noticed Seth or Punk, whoever, did not clear the table of the monitors before doing the pedigree on there. Usually wrestlers clear the table because they want to hurt their opponent, but not too badly. So let's clear away all the stuff that could jab them in the kidney. I didn't notice myself the announce table stuff, so I'll pay more attention. Brad, did you?
Yeah, it's a thicker table, seems to be a different material. Definitely seems like it is not intended to break, largely because it looks very expensive. A lot more expensive than the previous iteration. There's a lot of lighting in that thing, on the front, around the sides. It's got some red orangish lights on the two corners, which I thought was an interesting design choice. I'm not sure if this is going to be a Raw thing, like if it's just going to be the Raw table, or if they're going to use it for every show. It seems like it's an LED board in the front, so they can change it for whatever show they need. But I did notice for being on Netflix, the sides were that traditional Netflix, the color band. So they were leaning into it, working alongside with Netflix's branding. So we'll see. I mean, I would love for them to break it a lot more sparingly. But I don't know.
They should just have the Spanish announce table be the old announce table. So that's obviously the one that's going to get broken. The refs were wearing a new uniform. I assume that's to blend in more with the new mat. And on the mat, I want to say I'm a big fan of the adverts. Now, there's two adverts that I would not have, but I've always been in favor of putting ads on the mat because that is realistic. Even to the point of, if they weren't going to do it in real life, I would be in favor of putting gimmicked adverts on the mat, just because if wrestling was real, they would have commercial adverts on the mat. So I like that. Two of the things I wouldn't have picked, but I liked it, but I assume a lot of people do not like that.
Vince McMahon was very against ever putting ads on the mat. That was just, he wanted a clean surface, even though he thought boxing looked tacky and MMA looked tacky. So that's just more, I think, just, it's the new owners just want money. They're not thinking about other stuff that might have been a something that Vince McMahon held on to over the years.
Do you think that will affect the in-ring product to some extent? I don't know how much say the companies have, but you might not want blood all over your logo, or if there's some segment which is problematic. I mean, just look at all the Vince segments that we've now looked back through documentaries that are now problematic. I wouldn't want my company logo forever being associated with that segment. So do you think it will change? Do you think they'll maybe a little stricter on what you can do in the ring, or do you think they just have no say and they're just happy for the advertisement?
It's possible it didn't even cross their mind. Oh, will a sponsor want blood on their logo? I hadn't thought about that. I think they'll just do what they do. I think sponsors know they're being put on a mat where people fight and bleed and slam and whatever. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I don't envision it. It's good to call out, because I think it's a consideration that you have to think of. But my assumption is, UFC's always had adverts on their canvas. There's plenty of blood in UFC, and granted, there are different types of sponsors. I mean, WWE is certainly targeting in many respects a more family friendly audience, but I don't think there's going to be any real concern about blood staining the mat or anything like that on the rare occasions that they do use blood. And if they are going with these colored mats versus the off-white gray that they've always used traditionally, then I do think that will help cover it up too. So I don't think that'll be a big deal. As far as the actual content, I think these sponsors trust that that's not the company that WWE is anymore. I think there's a trust in Paul Levesque and in the vision that TKO, Endeavor, and Nick Khan have in general, that they're not going to have the super embarrassing segments of yesteryear that we were used to during the
that's era. A good point. Edward Sladek in the chat says, it's a surprise Vince never did ads on the ring mat. I don't think the new mat looks bad, but it clashes. The first match with Roman Solo and the Ref all wearing black in the ring. This is not real, says blood is like a highlighter on the mat. You'd think they'd want it. Standard Deviation says, I hope CM Punk bleeds on the Saudi Arabia logo. And Darrell says they have blood on their logos in boxing and UFC, so it doesn't matter. So a few comments in the chat there. Rivers, what else?
Was there a reason Roman Solo didn't go on last? Initially, I thought, I was joking. I was like, oh, maybe Rock had somewhere to be. But then I think he really did, because they showed him leaving. Roman's matches are great, but slow builds. So an odd choice to start with a slow building match. Also, they tend to be heavily booked at the end, which makes them a good choice for a main event. And even just having Rock come out at the beginning and then walking out at the end of the show would make more sense. So, do you think Rock just had somewhere to be? They had him for an hour, and that was why that match was on first?
My first theory would be he wants to come across like he's got more important things to do. And I think it's a bad look when essentially a co-owner, a heavy stockholder, an executive on the board, and shows up and doesn't stay for the whole show. I think that's kind of tacky, and I think it plays into some of the things that people hold against him. He might argue, I'm a big star, and I don't sit around for 3 hours and watch other people wrestle. I do my business and I leave, like it or not. And by the way, I'm going to be on NXT tomorrow night, so that makes up for it. All you people who think I'm not loyal, of course, he's going to the site of the worst example of nepotism in 20 years. Most embarrassing, I would say, the most just transparently, like, really. So I don't know. It's like when people show up late to the show too. They're just arriving. It's like, shouldn't these stars be arriving before the show starts? Brandon, what do you think about that? I mean, I don't think it's a huge deal, but I mean, if I'm Rock, I'd want to be kind of cognizant of how that message comes across when other people, if you want to be truly loyal to wrestling, you think you would stay around for the whole thing.
I mean, it's great for Final Boss Rock if that character is going to make a comeback. But if we're just going to get like Dwayne Johnson or Dwayne the Rock Johnson, I mean, that's the best way I can describe what we got out of The Rock tonight. It was Dwayne the Rock Johnson. It wasn't The Rock. If that's going to be what we see going forward, then yeah, I mean, it's not a great look. As far as Roman and Solo going on first, I mean, you hear a lot of wrestlers say, you hear a lot of bookers say, if you're not going on last, you want to go on first. It was still in a big spot on the show.
It's probably the most viewership.
Also, yeah,
I bet the first hour did better than the third hour. That's typically
right.
the case.
And also too, like they are technically SmackDown guys, so I think it would be kind of counterproductive just from a storytelling standpoint if Adam Pearce booked the SmackDown guys to main event his show.
Sure.
Just a small thing, sense. But
yeah.
2 more things. The announce team, it's a step down. It just is. I understand why they do it, and I probably wouldn't argue against it, other than it just makes the product a little worse. And to get you onto John Cena, did you notice his logo and his merch was Dodgers themed?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I was thinking about the color. It didn't cross my mind. Yeah.
At first and hated it, but I've got to give it up to them. If every town he goes to on this tour, he releases new merchandise based on that sports team, that's amazing, and he will make a lot of money.
A good point. We'll see.
Don't put it past him.
No.
I will say, I never feel as old as I do when I see John Cena. I think he looks great, but I always think of John Cena as 25 years old. Like Rock and Austin have always been older than me, and Cena is too, but Cena I think of as a young kid, so he looks great, but it's anytime he comes out, I'm like, oh yeah, that's what John looks like now. But
he looks better in a baseball hat. I like age-wise, I mean, better is the wrong word, but he looks more like the John Cena we all remember when he's got the baseball cap on. It's when the hat is off and there's a bald spot or the hair is just kind of different than it used to be. He shows more of his age there.
Being bald young, because like Austin just looked like Austin still because he never had hair, or at least when I remember him. That's it. So you can speak on John Cena's promo. I thought it was eye-rollingly John Cena, but in a sweet way. It's kind of like, oh, I remember that John Cena. That's cool. I'll hop off and listen for the rest of the night. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rivers. Great hearing from you. Eye-rollingly sweet. That's a interesting combination. And not necessarily inaccurate. I want to say quick before we go to Cena. I thought on the solo Roman thing, I wanted to point this out. Having Roman go on first when it's most watched, and having Rock open the segment and be there with and especially if Rock didn't want to hang out for all 3 hours, so there could have been some logistics, but it wasn't a great match to start with. And yes, I mean, Solo picked up the ring steps and threw him at Roman, and they brawled at ringside, but it's not a dynamic match. Like if you're a casual viewer, Roman and Solo are, I'm not sure what analogy. They're like two wrestlers who benefit. It's like having 2 NHL players who are scorers, but they're not good creating plays and assists. It's like almost the opposite of that. Whatever. But it's like they need somebody. Like Kevin Nash talked about. Shawn Michaels created movement for his opponents, especially for him, and that made the match good. When I interviewed Kevin Nash, he's like, creating movement. That was a big thing that I needed my opponents to have. Kevin had his strengths as a pro wrestler. Obviously his size and some of the body language and stuff, but Michaels was a guy who made the match exciting. Solo and Roman need that type of opponent to have an exciting match. Solo and Cody, even Cody is kind of that guy too, in a different way and not as extreme. But Roman doesn't seem super interested in being a bump machine or doing much more than what he was criticized for when Vince McMahon was pushing him hard as a babyface and he was lost as a character, which is at a very small moveset. And they were very video game, here's a button for this move, here's a button for this move. And that was about it. It's still there. He's super cool. He's super over. He's made a ton of money. He's the biggest star of this era. But you put him in a solo, it's not magic, Brandon. It's kind of laborious. It's plodding. They worked hard in the second half, picked up the pace. They didn't lose the crowd. But if you're a casual viewer tuning into Netflix, I could imagine people 5 minutes in going, okay, I'm going to switch channels now.
I think it depended on how big of a star you thought Roman came off as. I mean, if you're someone who's coming in watching this for the first time, I think how you feel about how you felt about Roman really dictated probably how much you were invested or interested in that match. It was a bloodline match. I mean, it was exactly what we've come to expect with these matches. You get slow and plotting. It's story driven. It's talk heavy. You know, they're talking, jawing at each other a lot off mic. It was Solo that was doing a lot of it instead of Roman. The roles were definitely reversed here. So it was what we expect out of the bloodline. I think if you've been watching this angle for 4 or 5 years now, then you knew exactly what to expect. But if you were a casual viewer coming in for the first time, then yeah, it could have been a little bit jarring or even a little bit off-putting.
Did you like the no rules aspect, the interference from the bloodline, then Sammy and Jimmy coming out, and all the interference leading to the finish? To me, it wasn't like a trapdoor escape. It wasn't an escape. I shouldn't say an escape hatch finish. You knew going in, it's a free for all. Anything goes. So it lived up to that in that way. I think there were some, convincing, believable near fall finishes before the final one. Ultimately, it had technically a clean finish in the sense that it was within the rules. Are you okay with that story that was told? Did anything about it surprise you?
I mean, Owens getting in there felt a little egregious in the sense that it felt like chaos for the sake of chaos, but I understand why they did it. I understand that they were driving the point home that, like, hey, Kevin Owens is still upset with Roman Reigns for everything that he put him through for years on end. So
yeah,
I mean, I could have done without that one, but I also understand
it fit his Cody obsession
they
too.
wanted to get Cody in there, and it sent the message that down the road we might see Cody and Roman team again in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, for the most part, it's just what I've come to expect in these bloodline matches. I just don't think that you're going to. I think it would have been unrealistic to expect a blow off to a feud like this without interference from the featured players.
Yeah. Okay, so on to Cena, which was Rivers' last topic for us. The chat room had a bit to say about this too. Let me see if I can scroll to the ones I highlighted here. While I do that, Brandon, what your thoughts on Cena? Eye rolling and sweet? Vintage Cena?
I mean, it's a good way to describe it. I want to mention too, Rivers brought up the idea of him doing themed merch for each city that they visit. I think it's a great idea. Ultimately, it's something that has become popular in the concert world in the last couple of years. I've been to a lot of tours at larger venues where the bands will have T-shirts specifically designed for the venue that they're playing. T-shirts and posters are the big one. And very often, like, if you want the city's T-shirt, you need to show up several hours early because it will sell out. So if they want to really market that and offer a limited quantity that you can only get them at the show, they're gonna it's a license to print money. I mean, and I'm sure WWE knows that, and Cena knows that, and they're going to take full advantage of it. As far as the promo itself, it was standard. It was standard Cena stuff to me. I mean, this is just kind of what I expect. The idea that he's never going to win his 17th world title, and then never say never. There's part of me that gets that Cena has to play into this idea that he is no longer an effective competitor because he hasn't won a match in 2000 whatever days, like he brought up. But, like, I mean, people know that it's pro wrestling, that people get title shots that don't deserve them all the time. John Cena's name in and of itself basically earns him a world title shot. So that felt like it kind of flew in the face of what the way that they present the company nowadays, and the way that they sell their stars. But it was Cena being Cena. I mean, he came around at the end. It was all a plot to get him entered into the Royal Rumble, and it was fine for what it was. You're muted.
The idea of I'm I would never win a world title again. It's not going to happen. Right.
I've done it 16 times, but never again. There's no way.
And it was like, just come on, people. I'm not. It's humble John Cena here knows I'm not good enough, and it's not the place I'm at in my career. And I know you people.
I could never win an Oscar.
Yeah. Like I could win an Oscar. I could win a world title again. I know you people want it, but I'm too humble to really believe that would happen. And then by the end, he's like, I'm going to win the Royal Rumble. It's like very so. Sean, we'll get to you in a second. Sean's itching to talk about Cena. Dan from Chicago said the John Cena promo was the most John Cena promo ever. Well put, Dan. Glad LA convinced him in the moment that he could win the Rumble. I hate seeing him doubt himself like that. Dripping with sarcasm there, Dan. We know what you're up to. Let's see what. Come on. There we are. Goodfella 1422 says Cena's promo is good, hoping he's all in on the in-ring side. I just don't want him to ruin anyone, and I'm really bummed out he didn't mention Austin Theory. I think he needs to have a match with Austin Theory and put him over and have it be the spark for.
Do you know, Wade, like when Cena, this retirement tour, how involved is he supposed to be? Is this a full-time thing? Is this he comes and goes?
Yeah, I talked to somebody months ago, saw a schedule, and it's like he's going to be around and then not around for a little bit and then around again, that kind of thing. It's like he won't be nonstop on TV. I think somebody said in the chat that, if I'm remembering right, Cena said he has 36 dates total, 36 matches or 36 dates. I don't know. So, that's a lot. That's more weeks than not. He's going to be on TV this year, even with PLEs. Let's say he's on 5 PLEs. That's still 31 out of 52 weeks. That's 3 out of 5, according to my math rounding. So that's a lot, and if you take some time off, that means you'll be on every week for 4 months. Then you'll take 6 or 8 weeks off, then come back and be, full time again. That's the. I didn't think it was going to be every week, but it sounds like he actually might be every week for a few months at a time. Another comment, then we'll get to Sean. Standard Deviation says that was certainly a John Cena promo. 1 minute he's telling us it's impossible for him to get a title match, and the next minute, actually about 3 minutes later, he's saying he'll win the Royal Rumble in main event WrestleMania. So, yeah, it's Cena. I just hope he doesn't bury anybody as some sort of, I don't know, whatever that Theory segment was. And then JC Scooby says, every time Cena keeps coming back, he looks older and older in that gear. That is because every time he comes back, he is older and he's wearing the same gear, and it's not necessarily age appropriate, but it's gimmick appropriate and merch money appropriate. All right. Sean Plichta from Tennessee joins us. Sean, I appreciate your patience. We had a longer line than usual here. Good to hear from you. What do you think about Cena? And welcome.
Always good to be here on with you, Wade. I'm glad you're feeling better. And guys, if you didn't catch Brandon, Frank, and I on the World's End post show, that was a blast. I had the quote of the night. I got the quote of the night. I'm excited. I was excited, Wade. I don't know if you got to see it, but it was cool. It was really fun. So I'm just sad you brought it up just right before I got on. I was so disappointed. I was like, man, I'm so ready to go on. I won't go on a big rant too much, but I'll say, I will. The promo was awful. It was awful. Come on, guys. It was not good. There was nothing good about it. It was awful. This is Cena. This is the Cena I don't want in my WWE anymore. I don't want. I understand this is his tour. He wants to go out on a good note. He's had a great career. I respect him. I've been a defender of Cena for a long time. I've been a defender of what he's done, what the matches he had, blah, 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 blah. This is just bad. I don't want this. I'm not excited about the matches he's going to have. The match with Theory was not Theory's fault. It was just bad. And it was mostly his fault because he's just not as good anymore. And he hasn't done it for a long time. And he's just not putting the work in that you would need to put the work in to be a successful wrestler in this day and age. And the Solo was good only to get Solo over, but the match itself wasn't good. He oversells everything and it just looks bad. And the promo is bad. I'm never gonna, like you said, I'm never gonna win, and then I'm gonna win. Oh, well, I could do that. Oh wait, I could win the Royal Rumble.
False humility is such a annoying trait to have when you present it as if it's endearing. It makes it a little bit worse.
It's an eye roll. It's an eye roll. It's an absolute eye roll. I hated it.
But it's an eye roll that's sweet if you just sort of resign yourself to that's John Cena being John Cena, which is, the argument I'm holding up air quotes in favor of it is it's just quintessential Cena. That's who he is. And that's why male fans booed him mercilessly for years and years, while the kids who didn't know any better and the women who didn't care cheered him. That's generalizing, but it's largely accurate, a representation of things. I mean, Cena's a big carny dork, but people love him, and he's, really talented. And he was a face of the brand that they needed to come out of that terrible mid 2000s post Benoit stuff.
He was,
he created a marketable. He drove away a lot of fans. There would have been great to have somebody who didn't have the negatives that Cena had. And I know Todd Martin's argued the other side of this, but I just, Cena provided, are you with me on that, Brandon, that Cena provided a stable, marketable, safe poster boy for if you live through it in real time, a badly damaged industry, and especially a badly corrupt WWE brand that I think a lot of sponsors would have run from if they didn't have a Cena era, despite all the booing. That I think strategic. It wasn't just Vince going, "Oh, this muscular guy, and he's my new babyface." I think they did see him as this sort of more pure character that could hit the reset button on what their brand represented.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that he's earned his place at the top of a lot of lists and greatest of lists and WWE's being WWE's professed greatest of all time. Like he's in that role because of what he represented outside of the business and what he represented in steering the company through one of its most challenging periods. I don't think you can overlook that. And I also think it's interesting that for somebody that was so universally disliked by the hardcore audience, for that to have come full circle and to have those people embrace what he is and what he still is really interesting. I mean, I'm interested in what this run brings for Cena. I hope that there's some nuance to what he opts to do. I mean, like I look at like peak John Cena as Peacemaker. And if anyone has, if you've seen the show, if you've seen the Suicide Squad that the character, the John Cena character originates from, I just think that's Cena at his best, leaning into the corny aspects of his personality and his character, and being irreverent and
it showed a self-awareness that was endearing.
Yeah,
I can laugh at myself.
So. Yes, a self-awareness for sure, and just acknowledging what he is, and I think that Peacemaker is just a really good representation of what Cena is capable of as an actor, and obviously he's not going to be Peacemaker on WWE TV, but I think that there are elements of that character that would make him a much more enjoyable wrestling character for this final run.
Sean.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon, I'm not as high on as you. I'm not. I just, like I said, his run's over. He was fine when he could think on his feet. He could have really serious promos, and he had good matches. Now he doesn't have either, and I just don't. I don't want a match with him and Cody at this point. I don't want that. Cody's in a good spot. I don't need him in a match with John Cena. I just, the match isn't going to be good, and it's gonna hurt Cody in the long run. It helps him in the sense of, oh, he wants a match with Cena. That's always been his dream, to have a match with Cena. Yes, like it helps in that respect. But he doesn't need to have a match with John Cena at this point. John Cena's not washed up, but he's not the John Cena he was 10 years ago. He's not going to have those kind of matches. He's not going to invest in it like that. It's not going to be as good as it would have been back then. And I don't need to have it on my, I hope I'm wrong. I'm going to let it play out for the whole year, but I'm not feeling good about it, and I just don't think
Sean, let me ask Brandon that. How do you feel about what we're going to... This is the biggest commitment from Cena in years. and he's going to be very integrated in this Netflix chapter. And Sean brings up valid points, and WWE is a brand that has built up goodwill with its fans. And part of it is they love Cody, they love Roman, they love Heyman, they love Punk, they love Seth, they love Drew, heels and face. I mean, and that's the men's side. And then you got this women's side, which is just growing. But we should talk about Rhea Ripley winning a title, maybe. Glad there was a title change on Netflix.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. Yeah.
Oh, good. We'll get to that next. So stick to that. Keep us on course after this Cena talk. People love Rhea Ripley, and they're into Tiffany and all that. So Cena can come in and not have it go exactly wrong the way Rock went wrong, but I mean, Cena's part of a different era. It's weird to say it, but he's part of a different era with WWE when the crowd wasn't on board with like almost everything the brand is doing. Obviously, Hogan, Saudi Arabia. There's certain things that are testing that right now, and I know there's people who are really being tested with the political side of WWE, and and there's a lot of different political views in WWE, and there's some people who are just whatever. That I don't want to get sidetracked with that, but it is the TKO, the UFC relationship, high profile, associating with different people. It's causing some testing of that goodwill. So Cena comes in and he reminds people of this whole other era. And Cena was not exactly willing to speak out against Vince McMahon. He's like, I'm probably not the person to objectively talk about this. He wasn't willing to take the stand. There's a whole Taiwan thing where he backed down. And so there's a chance this could really not work. I mean, there's a chance he could come in and be tone deaf. And he's going to show up. He's got his way of doing things. He doesn't listen to the current writing team. It's the best writing team and creative team they've ever had, I would argue, right now. Could this actually backfire and hurt the WWE product by having John Cena, as Sean points out, screw up Cody, screw up Gunther, screw up other people?
I think it largely depends on what does John Cena think of himself at this stage? Does John Cena see himself as a star who can still Bigfoot other talent, or does John Cena see himself as the legend of yesteryear who is going to help put over the current crop of talent? Because Cena comes from an era where when legends came to the show, they came to Bigfoot the talent. And he might have been the only guy who got away with that, got away with that not happening to them, because there was a level of protection for Cena that other talent didn't have. But when people from the Attitude Era showed up during the Ruthless Aggression era, they were there to make the current generation of talent look like fools. So the question is, did Cena take the right lesson from seeing that happen? Did he look at that and say, man, this really hurt my peers? Or did he look at that and say, well, this is what you do. This is what you do when you are a legend in the business. You come back and you Bigfoot other talent,
tough love,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, Vince McMahon's tough love. Like, I gave Austin Theory tough love. He's got a bounce. I knocked him down. I stomped on him. Theory, it's up to him to come back from that. And like you said, it's a mentality of wrestlers. The big. I mean, Hogan told me that when I interviewed him 25 years ago. He's like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's a dog-eat-dog world. I'm not going to apologize for using every tactic and every point of leverage I have to keep my position. And everyone else is fighting in the same way. I just happen to be more successful because I'm freaking Hulk Hogan. Very much paraphrased, but the spirit was not apologizing for playing politics and using his influence to retain his power. And kind of built in was lie to the media. They just want quotes. So I give them quotes and I exaggerate and make stuff up and make myself seem bigger than I am. I mean, it's just, so Cena has some Carney in him. He has some of that, carryover. But then you have the Peacemaker and you have this guy who's self-aware and can laugh at himself and is mega, mega talented. Like Lady B pointed out in the chat, John Cena is amazing. Point blank, period.
I'm sorry, Lady B. I apologize. I'm sorry.
And then Standard Deviation says Cena caused me to stop watching wrestling for a long time when I was a teenager, beginning to outgrow wrestling. He's so lame and uncool. And that's part of the risk I'm talking about. It's does Cena make people think? I thought WWE had moved on from this. Derek Mitchell says Cena reminds me so much of LeBron James, of the all-time greats, but is so polarizing and never universally loved, like Stone Cold by the audience. JC Scooby simply says Cena sucks. Derek Mitchell also brings up Michael Jordan. He wasn't the same when he went to the Wizards in 2001, but I enjoyed seeing his last playing years. I feel the same way about Cena. It doesn't bother me as much as Jeff Jarrett still wrestling.
It's a really complicated legacy for Cena because he is the face of an era that a lot of fans are embarrassed by. He is the face of the company during a time in which a lot of people were, covering up their wrestling merchandise and wearing something over their wrestling t-shirts. Like, it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool to be a wrestling fan at the time. We weren't in an era of like people culture has shifted in a way where I think now there is a large segment of the population who just thinks that it's cool to like what you like. And I think wrestling has benefited from that.
Yeah.
But when Cena was on top, that was not the mindset of the culture at all. And wrestling was not cool. Sean, to your point about, Cena probably facing Cody at some point, I understand that criticism entirely, and I don't entirely disagree with it. The little pushback that I think I would give is just like, if you look at Cody's opponents over the course of the last year, they haven't had a lot for him. I mean, Kevin Owens is really the first guy where there's been a lot of meat on that bone. He spent a lot of time with Solo Sikoa in a feud that didn't really get over all that well. So for me, like, if we were sitting here talking about a list of 7 or 8 guys that were coming down the pipeline for Cody and made a ton of sense to put him in a main event feud with, and then Cena comes in and Bigfoots those guys and steps in front of the line, then I think I would have some issue with that. But there aren't a lot of guys right now that are ready for Cody Rhodes and a program of that caliber. And I think, I don't want to see Cena get in there and just beat Cody. I think that Cena during this run should be a guy who is beating a lot of guys in flux, upper mid-card guys who, can visit the main event but aren't necessarily going to stay there, who they don't have necessarily like long-term main event plans for. But I don't want to see Cena beating guys like Cody Rhodes. I think that should be something they avoid.
Yeah. I would say the one thing I'll say, well, number one, I don't want Cena winning the Rumble. That's what I'm worried about. That is my biggest concern. I do not want him winning the Rumble. That would be not a good thing. And if Cody and Cena do wrestle, the one thing I like about it, and I think the promos can be okay, if Cena's invested and willing to not, I mean, he can make fun of himself here or there, but I want it to be serious and fun-loving in a serious way. Cody does tell really good stories in his matches, and he does get you invested in the match, and it'll be a slower-paced match, which I think Cena can do better in. And I think that would fit his style more at this age, part of his life. So I think they could do something good there if they go that route. But Cena winning the Rumble, no, do not want that at all. Would be a total wrong move if they go that route. Go ahead, start.
Sadler version 3 thinks I think Cena wins Rumble and gets 17. I don't think people care that much about number of title reigns. I think that was a big thing 15 years ago. When you had the Dudleys out there bragging about being like 87-time champions and Edge won the title, more times than Bruno Sammartino, but didn't have the belt, didn't matter as much, and there were multiple world titles. I mean, it's just, I don't care. People used to be, how many does Ric Flair really have? Do we count this one? Does that one count? It's like, I don't sense, and I'm not outside of, in areas. I mean, I'm sure there's a Reddit thread where people are obsessed with it, but I just don't think it's like a marketable thing anymore. I think 8 years ago, Cena going for the record would have been a key talking point. I think today people's eyes glaze over and go, well, who cares? Roman Reigns held it really for a really long time and made a really big difference. That's what counts, not how many times you lose it and then regain it because of rapid fire hot shot booking. I think fans are in on the meta. Brandon?
Yeah, I don't mind if he breaks it. And I say that largely because I don't think that there's anything wrong with WWE wanting to upend the record books for their guys. And I mean, getting Roman Reigns that length of title run was certainly a clear message sent that, you know, they wanted him historically to be an important figure. And with the company having distanced themselves pretty far from Ric Flair, and Ric Flair being, you know, was partnered with AEW, doesn't really appear to be any longer. I don't have any issue with them hanging that hat on John Cena, and just going there. I think if there's any guy you're going to do it with, it might as well be him. I mean, he's right there. The legacy is there. The history is there. Now, do I want to see them like tell his entire, you know, do I want to see them tell a year-long story of him trying to get there? Not necessarily. Yeah. And from a pure interest standpoint, I'd almost be more interested in seeing him win the Intercontinental title because he never did. Yeah. I mean, for a guy that
I could live with that.
Was in the company for a guy that was with the company for as long as he was, to have had all these titles and never have the Intercontinental title is really a pretty crazy stat.
Yeah. IC title John Cena. To me, I'm not like, I don't have a strong anti John Cena relative to other people like thing, but I kind of don't want Cena to be an IC champion. Like I kind of like that title, and it's not that it's been perfect, but right. I don't know. I mean, like I don't mind if Sheamus wins all the titles, but I don't know. Cena's IC champ just feels wrong.
Well, Sheamus has already lost its chance of the Intercontinental title like 4 times already. I mean, geez, I don't know how many more times he could lose the match to win the Intercontinental title. No, I'll do a few quick things. I'll get off this because Jason's been waiting forever, and I want him to get on and share his thoughts because I don't want him to get mad at me.
Jason dropped off, so maybe he'll come back.
I hope so, man. Yeah. Jason, I'm sorry, man.
He didn't choose to go to you. Although you did say get me on. I want to talk about Hogan, so maybe I would have gone with Jason first. So maybe it is your fault, Sean.
It probably is. No, I'll take it. Going back to Rhea. I mean, the match with Rhea and Liv was. I just want to give Liv her props. I think as a heel, Liv has done a really, really nice job. She's done really, really well in her role. I think it was definitely time to move the title off of her and get it back on Rhea. I mean, it was they had to go that route. I don't know how much they could have played this out with the Judgment Day. It was fun, but it had a shelf life, and this kind of was that shelf life. But the question is, first I want to say I did like when Taker came out and he gave Rhea the rub. I did like that. I thought that was really cool. If they're going to have him come out, have them hold up their fists together, I thought that was cool. I mean, you got to give her a rub in that way. I think that's a good way to do it. And were you surprised that Becky didn't come out? I just thought that they would bring somebody out or do something to kind of spice up the women's division a little more on the show after a title change like that. Like, okay, here's some more threats for her. You know, what would you guys think about that?
There are a lot of reports that Becky's going to be on this show and Penta's going to be on this show. And it's like, I mean, people were backstage maybe, but I mean, I thought they had, okay. I don't want to contradict myself. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. They had plenty to fill 3 hours. And people return of Becky Lynch would have been lost in the mix, for instance. Penta winning a squash match or something would have been lost. So they set the table, obviously, for Penta. Cole kind of winking at the audience with the Chad Gable thing. That should be a really fun match next week. I am really, really excited about what WWE does with Penta because he's the best luchador that they've had to work with since Rey Mysterio when it came to a lot of just charisma that just oozes out or just leaps out of his ring gear. But he's someone I think, and it's sort of controversial to say this with Penta fans, but he could use some discipline. He could use some refinement, frankly, in the WWE style of making every move count, following up on your moves and not posturing to the audience. There's just some sort of like Mexico house show type habits that he has that people pick up in the lucha style that I think WWE's going to, and it's not going to make him any less exciting. It's just going to make his matches frankly be more realistic and less eye-rolling, which I think they are at times because he'd be about to win and then he just stops and yells at the crowd. It's just like, come on, you're in a fight. Don't remind me you're not in a real fight and that you're out to just, quote, get yourself over. Mm-hmm. I'm ragging on the guy a little bit, but honestly, I think like he's mega talented, but he needed some curating, honestly, to fit in. You agree, Sean? I'm excited because WWE's not going to try to sabotage him. They want to make him a star, and I mean, Triple H want to make Sin Cara a star. Penta can be. I genuinely think he'll be a better overall performer because of what he learns in the WWE system. Brandon, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Penta is a really good fit for this current iteration of WWE. It's not something I would ever have said, during a Vince McMahon era, but under Paul Levesque, I think that he has a real chance to be this era's Rey Mysterio if they want to go that far with him. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he becomes a world champion or anything like that, but I think that there's a really good chance that he is treated with reverence and respect and is someone the crowd really gets behind. I mean, he is someone who they can again print money with his merch if they really get behind him.
Yeah.
Something that AEW completely failed to capitalize on with him. But I mean, I do not think it would be surprising to see a lot of Penta masks in the crowd very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Sean. Let's talk about Rhea and Liv. I straight off into Penta. Brennan, good timing for Liv. JC Scoopy says in the chat, Liv should have kept the title. I think you want a historically significant moment in the record books title wise for the first Netflix, and I think the timing is good. I'd get in the Rhea Ripley business if I'm WWE, and I know there's some, we'll see how the transfer window works out and all that. Does Becky show up and go as a heel and say, I want to take you down, Rhea? Or do they go there? All this potential calls from NXT. There's possibilities there, but it's not obvious to me what is next for her. But I think giving her the title, building around her is a can't miss proposition as long as you're ready to roll with it and provide opponents and feature her. She is getting top star reactions.
They teased building the company around her. Cole went hard after that title win, calling her, essentially a face of the company, that she is the face of the Netflix era. So they really went hard with the idea that this is someone to be viewed in the same conversation as Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, Seth Rollins. They want you to think of Rhea Ripley in that same conversation. And I think that having The Undertaker endorse her was, it was a little strange. Like I get the connection there. They were going for the badass, and Cole pointed that out, that it was the connection of both of them are badasses, which, it's a little bit of a stretch, but I understand why they made that connection. I thought that if you're going to utilize a legend for a one-off appearance who has cachet, this is how you do it. I mean, Taker didn't try to sell anything. He didn't say anything. He just came out there, drove around the ring one time, and endorsed Rhea Ripley without saying a word. I think that's, you can't ask for more for a legend character. I mean, that's what you want these people to do if they're going to show up.
Why did Undertaker not get booed like Hogan did when they've both been very MAGA out there? Or are they booing Hogan because of the racist comments? I mean, or is Undertaker?
I think that there's I don't think that the reaction to Hogan was even necessarily largely political. I think it's it's his history. I mean, the history of comments, the history, the things that he's done, the things that he's said. And then also just fatigue. I mean, fatigue with the character. Hogan is not special anymore. I mean, it's The Undertaker is harder to access. You can find Hulk Hogan at his beach house in Florida anytime if you want to go see him. Like, it's just not. He doesn't have that cachet anymore.
And he is like, he's Cena without the eye-rolling sweetness, in the sense he's literally coming out there with an American flag waving, trying to sell beer to people. It's just a
completely tone deaf.
Yeah. And I mean, Jimmy Hart, I mean, I've interviewed Jimmy. He's a sweet guy, but it's like he's the hanger-on of all hangers-on if you're a WWE fan watching Hogan with his, Jimmy Hart waving the American flag. And it's just like, I think there's a level of fatigue, but also just sort of a level of tacky transparency to the commercialism that the Hulk Hogan character has become, and now he's a beer guy, and it's abundantly clear that he's grifting every single time you see him. Yep. Yeah. People have figured him out. They see him for what he is, and he's not savvy enough. And his fan base has aged out enough. This isn't Rock Hogan. I mean, we're decades past that moment where Rock was like, whoa, that's not what I expected. Derek Mitchell says, I think The Undertaker is a reverence from the crowd, while Hogan has increasingly become cringe every time he opens his mouth. Yeah, Hogan's cringe. I mean, he can ask his son next time he tells him not to marry a black woman what cringe means. Ken Arnold says, Hogan is attempting to copy Steve Austin in his beer, and it's not working at all. Sadler Version 3 says, I don't think it's just racism or MAGA. Hogan was hated amongst hardcore fans for years for being phony. He gets hate from literally all angles. Ken Arnold says, people are just tired of Hogan. It's been one note for so long, and he looks so worn down and horribly physically, and he's trying so hard to be the Hulkster from 25 years ago. I thought he was going to fall over. I mean, he was, it's not a personality flaw with everything that he's been through and the hip issues and all that, but he wasn't standing behind a podium, flexing. He was bright lights shining on, 70-year-old skin and broken hips. I mean, it was tough to watch him still try to be the Hulkster. It is. I think people look at him and they're like, he's such a shell of what he once was, and just like you say, Brandon, just grifting. So yeah.
But I want to say too, going back to Rhea, because I want to get back to that, because we could harp on that all day, and it's too late for that. Rhea, she needs heel people to work with. There's not a lot of heel women. Yep. That's the thing. I like the Rhea. A good fellow said Rhea versus Bianca. If they turn Bianca heel, which the more I think about it, the more I actually like it if she's willing to do that, because I don't know if she's willing. But if she is, that would be the next big feud for Rhea, because there's not a lot of heels that they've built up. And going back to, and one thing I wanted to bring up regarding the look of the show.
Yeah.
The look of the show was really, I mean, it was cool, but they had so many lulls. Even when they came back from, if you did have ads, which I did. I was one of the ones that did, which was fine. I kind of knew I was going in. So when they came back, they're going for the talking about certain stuff. They talked about the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. Oh God. Oh Lord have mercy. Then they would have so many extra lulls in between that. Like, I wish they would have done more backstage stuff tonight like they normally do. They didn't do hardly any of that tonight, which that was a downer for me. But what I didn't
Chad
like,
Gable. What else did we have? That was
and
did feel different.
A couple of the boxes. They had New Day.
Yeah, but I'm thinking more traditional, just kind of backstage, like there's a brawl, there's someone in the background, they cross paths. It did feel. I am curious, and I said I at the top of the show, I said I didn't really finish my point. By the end of January, Raw's going to be Raw. You know what I mean? They're not going to be in this shiny best arena ever, the newest arena. Not say best, but the newest arena with all the bells and whistles. It's going to be Raw, and I don't think they're going to give up the things that Sean just mentioned, Brandon, that weren't there that he kind of missed. I think they believe in their formula for Raw and SmackDown, and I don't think they are going to force a differentiation. There might be more drone shots and different logo and ads on the mat, but I mean, they just want to get back to business. This was a special kind of Center's Main Event PLE hybrid type special episode of Raw, and I don't even know if it's going to typically be 3 hours. I mean, it might clock in at 240 or 225 a lot of weeks too.
And you already saw it in the promotion for next week too. I mean, the graphics were different. I mean, the match graphics tonight were like a one night only thing. They had new graphics for next week, which I thought were really good, by the way. Full body shots of the wrestlers instead of just close ups. Just really, really sleek, professional looking. So yeah, I think it's going to largely return to being a what feels like a pretty normal show starting next week, even just based on the lineup, what they have scheduled for next week's show. And I saw people talking in the chat about potential returns, and we talked about Penta and all that. I think saving that stuff for week 2, week 3 is much better. I mean, a Becky Lynch return tonight just gets lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and but one thing I wanted to bring up was going back to that. I did not like all the faces and heels together. I don't like that. I don't know why they do that. I know they're trying to make it feel like everybody's there because it's it's the talent's there and it's a big show, but we don't need Tiffany there. We don't, or with the because we don't know what Tiffany is right now. We assume you talked about it on the SmackDown post show. You think she's initially face now? I don't think so. Like, she's still threw Bianca over the table. She still beat up faces to get to what she wanted to do. I don't, and like I said, a face turn for her right now is I don't know. I don't feel as good about it as a lot of people. I think that could hurt her. I really do. I know the fans love her; they want to cheer for her, but I don't know if she's ready character-wise to turn into a baby face right now. I don't know if she's ready for that moment, and just all the faces, the New Day kind of up there, and Byron Saxton acting like a weirdo, which I know he's kind of a weirdo, but they're all celebrating and just I didn't like the faces and heels together. Shinsuke was sitting with Bianca. Why would Shinsuke be sitting next to Bianca for crying out loud? Like, what are we doing? And I didn't see that in the chat that Chris just said that, but I was just, I saw it and I was like, Wade, you said it and I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense in the scheme of we're trying to immerse ourselves in a thing and Shinsuke sitting next to Bianca. Yeah. How would we, I just didn't get it. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that because I know we didn't really talk about it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you have to have a hard and fast, like old school rule where face and heels can't be seen at the same restaurant or Bill Watts will fire you. But you know, when you're staging people sitting together, Shinsuke's been pretty, you know, heelish. I mean, yeah, he's been devious and I don't know. So like I think it takes something away. Actually, I mean, it's not even like that he's sitting next to Bianca as much as he's just sitting there. Like, I just don't think it's like it would like I didn't think like Bray Wyatt or heck even the Wyatt Six now should be like part of or Solo. Like I had a problem with Solo on when was it when he was like part of some promotion for he was like doing a promotional video like, oh, Solo, new bloodline, we need you to show up at 3 p.m. on Sunday for a photo shoot. So I'll be there. I'm a company guy. Like, why are they it's when they did the football introductions for that whenever that was. There's so many events now. And I was like, why are the new bloodline? Why is Jacob Fatu shouldn't show up for that? I don't want to think he's
absolutely
dutifully showing up for work so he doesn't get fined. It's so tone deaf. It was like when Netflix ran the ads going, you can't fake this. And it's like, nobody thinks of the word fake anymore who's watching this. Nobody's thinking, well, the wrestling's fake and that bothers me, but at least the crowd reactions are real. That's horrendous marketing. That person should be nowhere near any marketing pitches for WWE, whoever that was, whether they work for them or Netflix. So tone deaf. And so this isn't as bad, but like Nakamura should, like, if you see him, he should be wandering around outside doing strange things in the background of some shot of Cody arriving. Like, he shouldn't be sitting at ringside going, look at me next to, you know, all these celebrities. So anyway.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. I just that was a little, I don't know, but the look of the show was cool, and I'm excited for, you know, especially next week with the, you know, Dakota and Lyra match. I think that's going to be a fun match. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it's a mid-card title, but you know, I want some of these mid-card women to get built up, and if they can do that, I think this is a fun way to do it on Netflix, and so a new era. So. And the way they did the show, the look of the two like their live like looks, like they were kind of looking in live and they were moving around, their photo was moving around. That was cool too. I like that. Made it more sports like. So yeah, I just thought it was a fun show. There were things like, you know, I could nitpick. Oh, Jay, I wanted to bring up Jay.
Yep.
Again, I told you, Wade, the match was fine. I know Jay is over, and Jay, he's so over. He's very genuine. Like, I like Jay a lot. He's not, as a singles wrestler, I just don't enjoy him as much. He doesn't have the best moveset of all time. I think he needs to move away from the spear. It doesn't necessarily look all that great. I mean, it's okay, but I wish he would do. So the match was fine, but how long do you think he can go with? I mean, the Heat will go a while because the fans are so into it, and obviously Cole actually was amusing me. Him getting on the table too actually did amuse me tonight. I don't know why. I just thought it was hilarious, but I didn't think Jay should. I know it was just a roll up. I didn't think Jay should be winning either. I know it helped. It kind of leads to Drew just kind of complaining about other things, and I get that's part of it too, but I really wanted Drew to get a heel to get a strong win tonight, and I think Drew needed to get one. Jay's fine. He's so over, it doesn't matter if he necessarily loses a singles match, but I want to hear what you thought about his matches in general. Can he keep going with the matches he's having, even though he's so over as he is? And I love Jay. I'm a fan, so I want to hear what you thought about that.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, I went back and forth on who I thought should have won tonight. I think Jay has eaten a lot of pins for a guy who is in the upper mid card. And Drew, I think losing in the way that he did
was a Maha straw cradle. Was it just just like a leverage, shoulders leveraged down out of nowhere type thing.
Yeah, and it was off of the Claymore. Like Jay just kind of ducked the Claymore, and Drew landed on top of him and leveraged into the cradle.
Yeah,
it was a cool finish. I think that Drew can turn that into something. I think that he can further this character that he's playing with that. So it didn't bother me a ton. But I think we're getting into that situation with Jay where we've been in all of his feuds so far, where it kind of feels like he needs to win, but also the other guy needs to win, and you're not really sure what to do. I mean, I felt that way with Braun Breaker too. It was like you built up Jay all this time for a big singles title win, but then he has to face Braun Breaker. It's like, what do you do? Jay's in a weird spot. I don't think that any of his singles matches have been great. I think that there is a list that have been good. I think this match was solid. I think that he's had good matches with Braun Breaker, but he's had some duds too, and he's very clearly better as a tag team wrestler and someone who is getting by on the gimmick because it's just so incredibly over. And I don't see that changing anytime soon either.
Yeah, I think they see Jay's popularity as a bit of a conundrum. We got to push him, and we don't want him in the tag division because it's just, I mean, they can, but it's not the same. So, but, I mean, it's kind of the finish I would have expected. I mean, yes, you could job Jay, but it kind of would define him down a bit. Drew can throw a fit over it. I mean, it wasn't like you won with a finisher. I mean, it is in the pro wrestling.
Drew has beaten him several times, too.
Yeah. So, So in the parlance of pro wrestling, fans see that as not a decisive win, but a lucky win. It's just, So anyway, that's good enough. Sean, anything else quick you want to add with?
No, I just this will be my last time really getting on much because, like I said, I work on Monday night, so I'll have to go back and watch, and which is fine. I mean, it's cool. But, Netflix does work really good now. Going back and seeing, I can just go right back in and watch it, so that'll be great. But I appreciate you guys. All you do, go VIP guys. If you don't, you're crazy, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. Anyone discovering us tonight? PWTorch.com/govip gives you full details on VIP membership. 35 plus years archives, new content every day on our Apple Podcast feed, our Spotify compatible feeds, full details on all the perks, ad-free website, ad-free mobile site. Check it out. PWTorch.com/govip. Some top tier podcasts you just aren't going to get for free anywhere else. All right. Some comments in the chat. Okay. By the way, we're not going to do mailbag, but we will Jason Paul tomorrow. We've got way more emails than usual. We'll go through those, and Jason and I will cover them. So Zach and David and Chris and Edward and JB will tune in tomorrow for the flagship. By the way, is free for everybody, but podcast only. It's not YouTube. It's not video. Rotating co-host Jason Paul joins me every 3 weeks. He's my co-host tomorrow. That'll drop on the blue feed tomorrow. You can get a link at pwtorch.com or search Wade Keller in your podcast app. Subscribe to the Red Logo Show and also the regular podcast, the Blue Logo Show. And it'll be there for you. Definitely have some emails on just people reacting to Raw on Netflix and The Rock and Hulkamania and more. But in the chat, some people commenting on some things we're just talking about, including Shinsuke and the crowd. I want to underline, Corey Dallas-Standing said, fighters are in the audience all the time in combat sports. But, Brandon, there isn't a Shinsuke Nakamura who's sending in these mysterious videos and playing mind games and blowing mist at people. The idea is, and Chris Johnson says, 3 nights ago, Shinsuke is this evil samurai. Tonight, he's just chilling like he's at the Oscars. I don't like it. And that's the issue. It isn't a face heel thing. There's plenty of heels who could sit next to babyface. I'd be like, I don't know that I would want to overdo it, but it's not like a big deal. I would vote largely against it, but it can feel a little old school and whatever to just have divided lines everywhere all the time. But there's certain characters like Solo Sikoa shouldn't have been doing that Survivor Series, Monday Night Football introduction spoof with Jacob Fatu. And you don't want Bray Wyatt doing promotional videos, and he did. I was like, really, you corralled Bray into showing up at a studio. I mean, come on. You want to imagine him not being, it's like herding cats. You don't want to think he can just show up for work. Same thing with Shinsuke's character right now. Like, I would rather have him wandering around in the background when Cody arrives in his nice car. And like, was that Shinsuke just wandering around the bushes in the back? Like, I don't know, being weird or mysterious.
Cole didn't really know how to handle it either. He called him international superstar. Like, it was just it was a little out of place. I mean, they have a big roster. They could have put anybody out there.
That's the thing.
Because
he's not a New Japan dignitary with, it's like, maybe someday he'll graduate. And other times he has been that. That's not who he is right now. So it felt a little tone deaf. And that's all we're getting at. It isn't about this idea that, like that quote with Ed Ferrara. By the way, speaking of VIP membership, I updated our list of all my interviews with ex-WWE creative team members from like 2002 through, 2021 or something. And there's like 125 of them. And so if you're not a VIP member or it hasn't been convenient to find them, that it's on the sidebar of the VIP website. It's there as a special collection link. And this last couple of days I updated it, and it is complete now. So you can go through interview, over 125, I think, interviews and podcasts I've done with ex-creative team members. And Ed Ferrara once said to me, well, wrestling fans know it's fake, so we shouldn't be trying to pretend it's real anymore. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. But the spirit of the comment was, we don't want to insult people. I think he might have even said, we don't want to insult people's intelligence by pretending it's real. And I think it's insulting what wrestling fans want by not pretending it's real. You want to give people that immersive environment. Matt McCarthy, ex-creative team member, we talked a lot about this. Stand-up comedians have personas on stage. They cultivated in the small clubs. They figure out what their audience, their tone, their gimmick's going to be. And then they stick to it, even when their life changes, even when they're not like that anymore. They might change their political views. They might be married with kids, but not incorporate it into their act because their act doesn't fit, or it does fit, but they lean, whatever. They have personas that they market, and wrestlers are like stand-up comedians. There's a foundation of authenticity, but it gets amplified and embellished for the sake of the act. And fans know that. But what you don't want to do is work really hard in the confines of the show to get those characters over and then flaunt them being out of character on the shows themselves. I don't even know how I feel about them breaking character on official post-show press conferences. I'm kind of against that. I don't think it's not so much an old school thing, because there weren't those things back in old school. I just think you don't want to, like Mickey James once told Pat McNeil on a live cast, we're overly familiar with fans now. There's a mystique that's gone, and I think it's good to leave people wondering. I don't want a stand-up comedian who I really enjoy his act going on, Kimmel or Colbert and just being completely different and going, oh yeah, when I'm stand-up, I pretend to be this. Like, give me something to believe in. Don't flaunt something that goes against it. That's all we're asking for here. I think people who are like, why is Shinsuke sitting there? It's just, or people mixing in the party room. Certain heels, it might work, but mostly don't needlessly pull the curtain back. Have there be a little mystique. Anything quick on that, Brandon, or if you said what you wanted to?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, I think I do want to raise though the point that Levesque did it himself in the opening promo segment.
Yeah.
I mean, using both the term face and heel, and then what was the other one? He work and shoot.
Yeah.
Strange.
Yep.
Yeah.
It when you do that, it doesn't feel like, oh, he's talking to us. It feels like, oh, he's desperate to get our approval. Because look, he's really talking to us. Yay. And I think it feels like pandering. And yeah. I mean, face and like heel is a universal term for, a jerk or whatever. I mean, that's been around, predating whatever it was. I'm sure it's a term used in 1940s movies. He's a heel, he's a jerk, he's a whatever. But all those other fun 30s and 40s terms used, schmuck, I don't know. That's a pretty universal non-kayfabe breaking term. But face, it's like, Jim Ross would always say protagonist, and his, it's all we've got protagonists and antagonists in wrestling. And yeah, I mean, that's it. But I don't get what he benefits from saying that. I don't think the people he's talking to really want that. And if they do, they shouldn't, I would argue. You want that mystique there. And it just, it feels like needless pandering. I don't know. Not a huge deal, but I wouldn't do it. And Standard Deviation says the work shoot line was the least intuitive of the insider terms. I don't think my parents would have any idea what they meant. So I don't even get the point then of doing it. Dan from Chicago just said, do you think that opening video pulled the curtain back too much? Kayfabe seems like it doesn't have a place in WWE with that being their mission statement. It just give us an immersive experience, and that broke it, and it felt, like I said, kind of pandering. Brandon, anything else from the show tonight you want to bring up before we sign off? Like I said, we'll do the mailbag tomorrow on the flagship with Jason Powell.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. One, I thought it was really neat that when they came back from break at one point and they were showing celebrities and whatnot at ringside, they used the old Across the Nation theme, Raw theme from, I think, like circa 2002-ish, that people really liked.
Was that the Pointer Sisters? Was that by the Pointer Sisters?
No.
That's an AW joke. Right.
Oh.
That's her new theme for Dynamite last week.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So they highlighted that theme, and so I was listening throughout the rest of the show because I thought, oh, they're going to run through a bunch of other former Raw themes, and they didn't. It was it was almost like, oh, they got clearance for this one song, and then they didn't bother to do the others. But hearing that anyway was cool. The only other thing I wanted to mention, I really hope that there is a plan for Joe Tessitore, because I grew to really enjoy his commentary on Raw and thought that he brought a really unique and interesting flair to the product. Clearly knew what he was talking about. Sounded like he was well studied, well read, just super, super professional. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I don't love him as a football commentator, but I think he works tremendously as a pro wrestling commentator.
I agree. He's the best new guy from the sports world. I assume he's going to be calling 3 hours of SmackDown and being Joe Tessitore with Corey Graves and Wade Barrett. I think they're going to do a 3-man team.
Okay. I was wondering if he was, if there was plan, because I had heard that the SmackDown booth was in flux. Yeah. So I was a little worried that he wasn't going to be heavily involved.
This is when I know the show's long. He gets impatient. He wants his final meal and he wants to take a nap. Yes, you're on YouTube. You don't know what that means. All right. If I lose track of the clock, I know when he gets up, because I've slept for over 2 hours. Give me attention. Give me food. For our podcast listening audience, my dog just made an appearance and a cameo.
Oh, on the World's End post show, we had cat appearances. It's fine.
Oh yeah. Cats are that's fun, and they're just doing their thing. Tessitore's good. Tessitore's, and I mean, I thought that he was too affected when he talked to us at the beginning, and he just, within 2 weeks, he dropped all that. I don't know if he took criticism or watched himself back or read my comments or was critiqued internally, but he was just too affected. It was too unnatural, and it felt like, honestly, like the phrase I used is, he talked in a tone that you talk to someone if they've had too much to drink and you want their car keys. And I don't think wrestling fans want to be talked down to that way. And he cleaned it up. It's like, And there was it week 2? He called the main event, and there was like this big moment, and he called it. I'm like, he's going to be good. He's going to be very good. He had a very early big match performance, and he's a keeper. Okay, I'll just do some random chats to wrap up here. That I starred as the show was going on. I didn't get all of them, but Rodrigo Hernandez said, bloated show, all the self-congratulatory praise, drone shots, and celebrities was too much. I think you had to do a lot of that in order to make it feel like this is a very big deal. But, it's time to just get back to the wrestling show people want. I mean, that was Daniel Lee said a boring, not good show. Junaid said, hi, everyone. Pretty good Raw Netflix, which went very smoothly. It was zero buffering. Great show also. Not blockbuster, but the presentation was great. Fastian Bargains said, I found it very slow moving with way too long breaks between matches. Not great at all. A 5 out of 10. And Brian said, jam too much junk into one show. A 3 out of 10. Boring and predictable. Howard Brown said, I enjoyed the show. Junaid said storylines were moved at a decent pace, which felt like business as usual, but this was largely about WWE lavishing Netflix with their infinite gratitude. David Hager on The Rock said Rock proved to be worthless and stuck his nose way overboard, killing storylines he created and wanted 9 months ago. Daniel Lee said The Rock dropped the final boss gimmick and just killed 2 potential main event feuds. I actually think I read that earlier. Back to the evaluation of the show, David Hager said, to me, this was an overstuffed nothing burger for 2 hours. Rhea and Seth and Punk were the only good things. Drew and Jay seemed rushed and off. Dougie Dog, speaking of dogs, said the best production on a wrestling TV show of all time. Those drone shots were incredible. David Hager said the arena looked great. Lights on every seat was a cool thing. That's just an arena thing. But Dougie Dog said the opening promo where Dwayne sucked up to the executives and broke the fourth wall to get himself over at the expense of his storylines was on brand. And Sadler said, I thought the crowd was hot at some points, but mild at others. Felt like a typical WWE crowd. Rock scene and main event entrances got good reactions, though. And then this is interesting. Lady B said, I find it interesting that Stone Cold has been distanced from the product over the last year. As a fan, I know he loves his ranch and fur babies, but he missed the WrestleMania 40 moment and now Netflix Raw. I wouldn't have been surprised if we had a Stone Cold entrance, but I don't think he wants to share the stage with The Rock and Hulk Hogan and John Cena. He doesn't want to be. He's been in a situation before where there's been tension with him and Hogan. I think it was at a WrestleMania and how they would. I can't remember all the details. I reported on it that there was, he wants to be the alpha because of who he is and his persona and what he meant to the business, and he doesn't want to show up and get walked on or not treated. And he and Triple H during their days were more rivals than pals. So, Brandon, I'm not surprised, and his personality is he just doesn't want to leave the ranch, and I don't blame him.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the scarcity that he brings to and why he's remained so revered and so popular for such a long period of time, because if Steve Austin shows up, it's going to mean something. He is the antithesis of Hulk Hogan in that way. If Austin's going to leave the ranch and show up in whatever city they're doing their show in, he needs to have a reason for it. And for Hulk Hogan, it's if you'll pay him to be there, he'll come every week.
Yep. Efren says, I'm tired of them taking attendance at these shows. End of WrestleMania, beginning of tonight, etc. I think it's part of the marketing of how hot their product is, and I'm okay with it. Sports teams brag about sellouts and stuff. Don't belabor it. Cole said it like 3 times tonight at least. How do you feel about it, Brandon?
Yeah, it's not I could take it or leave it. To me, it goes back to the presentation thing that I brought up earlier with the NFL on Netflix versus WWE on Netflix. Netflix, the NFL is very sure of itself. It knows what it is. It believes that the NFL being on Netflix they are gracing Netflix with their presence, not the other way around.
Yeah.
This was WWE
they say new money. This was new money. The term new money, where people who are 6 generations rich don't drive the fanciest car around the neighborhood, but people who just got a .com, well, that's dated now, but the .com money, the whatever, who's the Dallas Mavericks owner, Mark Cuban, he was .com money, he's no money. And then they tend to be a little more ostentatious and, hey, look at us, look at our jewelry, look at all that. And WWE is sort of hey, look at us, we're on Netflix, we're big time now. And the NFL's old money, we're yeah, exactly what you said, Brandon. Netflix is good. It should be happy to have us.
Of course, Netflix wants us. We're the NFL.
Exactly. No, WWE is different. Pro wrestling is different, and it seemed like the Netflix executives were happy with the attention, and it's what Bully Ray did with Dixie Carter: create a storyline that keeps the money mark, rich family money coming, and you as a centerpiece act, and stretch it out and build it up till you can have the big moment, and every executive says we're not going to be on TV, and then they get talked by wrestlers and but this would be a good story, you should do it.
I think that going forward, you're just going to see the same level of promotion that you did for USA Network, that you did for Fox. It's just week 1 is a different animal, but starting next week, you're going to get Netflix commercials for Netflix shows because you're on Netflix, the same way that you'd advertise USA shows on USA. And that will be that. I don't expect it to be nearly as in your face.
I'm curious if when I turn on Netflix in 6 weeks if Raw on Monday night is in my face.
Front and center.
Yeah, like, dude, because I mean, there was before there was a time, like a lot of streaming services aren't like Netflix. You turn it on, it's not as dynamic and interactive and hey, let us recommend this for you. Some of the streaming services just, and some are a mess. Prime is just a mess. I still don't know what's free and what's not and what's featured. It's just, it's so poorly designed. And so, but Netflix has a chance to grab your attention. I mean, they pretty much tell you, here's what the country's watching, here's the top 10, and here's what we think you would like, and let's give you a slideshow of 4 or 5 of them. And that does kind of dictate a lot of people's viewing habits, and it works. Well, they have a chance to push that on Raw. And, a few years ago, I remember saying Netflix is going to do that. People are going to turn on Netflix, and Netflix is going to promote what, WWE, if they get them or whatever wrestling show they have, it'll help them. And they are doing that. I just don't know how long it lasts. And if they sort of kind of like Fox, there's a peak and then there's a drop off and they hit a water level, or does Netflix continue to really push hard and actually bring new people in? Saturday's main event on NBC, I feel like has over the years been an attempt to bring new fans in and appeal to casual fans. This didn't feel as overtly that. It just felt like we want our fans to think we're a big deal and that we're entering this boom period. And we know there's some new people, so Michael Cole will, do some heavy lifting, and explain things. But it didn't feel like they were just pandering to casuals at the expense of their core group. It felt more like a happy medium in that regard. Do you agree with that, Brandon?
Yeah. There wasn't like overt exposition about what these matches were. They went into it with you were expected to have followed the product already to know why these matches were taking place. And I thought that was the right move overall. I was just going to add that prior to the show, like, so obviously because it's a live event, when you get into Netflix, when you're able to scroll through, it was the top, the event at the very top. But I did find it interesting that in addition to that, they also featured it on the profile select screen. So if you have multiple profiles for Netflix, when you pulled it up, and I'm sure this depends on which device you use to stream Netflix, but on mine, on Apple TV, for example, I was given my profiles on the left-hand side, and they were advertising Raw on the right. So it was even before you got into Netflix proper, you were already hit with an ad for Raw.
That's interesting. I'm launching my Netflix app on my phone. I'm curious what shows up. Black background on profile. I click my profile. Squid Game Unleashed. Netflix really wants me to play their games, by the way. They're always pushing on my phone, especially
on your phone. Yeah.
They really want me to do that. I should. I don't. I don't know if I should, but I'm not seeing. Oh, they're Raw. If I scroll down enough, live and upcoming, they're advertising January 13th Raw. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like the 5th row. It's advertising Raw live next week. So people who scroll through Netflix, and I don't know how much of that is customized to me and my viewing habits versus being universal, but they're going to know people who watch certain genres and they're going to push it. But the NFL pushed the hell out of SmackDown on Fox on their games. Troy Aikman reading those lines begrudgingly. And it didn't help. Like, SmackDown, well, I shouldn't say it didn't help. SmackDown reached a water level, but we attribute their viewership to the broadcast network format versus cable, and also the Bloodline storyline and the Sami Zayn storyline and all that. I don't know if the NFL helped a lot. I mean, it didn't hurt. It helped somewhat, but it didn't take them to like 4 million viewers. So I don't know. But Netflix, it's going to be judged differently. Netflix is going to give us likely the total number of viewers, not the average viewership over the course of 3 hours and 4 minutes. So we're going to find out how many people watched for 10 minutes, but we're not going to find out a number that's compatible apples to apples with what we're used to with Nielsen, where, when Nielsen says, 2 million people watch SmackDown, it's actually like, 2.7 million, but or 3.3 million, but a lot of people only watch for a short period of time. So it's the average in any given minute who are watching. Netflix and WWE are going to issue a press release saying 14 million people watched but what they should say is for at least 2 minutes or at least 20 minutes to give us some context. And how many were US versus global. I mean, the data is going to be different, and we'll adjust, and there'll still be relevant metrics for how we track this. I had my Dynamite report on PWTorch.com kind of breaking down TBS versus Max and what we know and what we don't know. And our Twitter poll that kind of captured at least, a little bit of a hint of one subset of the audience and how they watch. So we'll see. But Netflix is going to they're going to look at the numbers and see, a diminishing returns in terms of heavy advertising. And at that point, they're going to direct their resources elsewhere. I mean, that just feels inevitable. They're going to, just like Fox, they realized we're not going to get to 3.5 million again. We'll still read the spots in the NFL, but the audience is the audience. But Netflix is going to grow it. I just don't think it's going to keep exponentially growing it, Brandon.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that this is going to somehow open them up to some massive new audience. I think that, you're going to get people who might check out more of the product now, who maybe were relying on clips because they weren't subscribing to a cable service. Because we say, oh, Raw was on quote unquote free TV, but TV is very expensive. So you still had to have a terrestrial cable package or YouTube TV or whatever the case may be. And all those services are pricey. So this is a much different scenario. I mean, the entry point for Raw had previously been whatever your cable package was, whether that be YouTube TV or terrestrial cable or what have you. The entry point now is, a $7.99 Netflix plan, which I think that's still the price of their lowest tier.
I'm not sure.
Maybe it's $9.99 now, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. And if you have certain cable providers, not cable providers, cell phone providers, then it might be included for free, the lowest tier. So some people are not going to be paying extra for this now, which is a big change.
The question is, does this help USA Network? Do people get addicted to WWE and they're like, you know what? I don't want to miss out on what I just saw highlights on SmackDown. So now I've got to get cable again, or I'm going to start watching on USA. Netflix can be sort of a portal or a gateway into expanding Peacock viewership for the duration of their deal and help sell more tickets or at higher prices. It's crazy. Somebody in the chat commented on like it was $400, I think, for a bad seat.
The prices for this show were insane.
Yeah. And they bragged. And by the way, WWE, this just stop congratulating fans for being part of the largest gate. That makes your stockholders and executives rich, but you're basically saying, congratulations, fans, for spending more to be at this building than anyone has ever paid before. I don't feel proud of that if that's me. No. They need to kind of, I think, check that a little bit. And
why should the fans care about that?
That's the thing. Yeah. When you say, I would stay away from Gate. I just go, we got to sell our crowd. We're proud of it. And, WWE for years, they had the WWE Facts. They wanted to brag about network, this for the network and attend. And that's fine. You want to create a sense of momentum with your audience that you're watching a hot product. That's good. But yeah, the whole thing about you guys, we gouged you for more money than any promoters ever gouged you before for upper deck seats is what I hear when they say that. So,
and I don't think people are thinking. I think that you achieve everything that you're looking to achieve by saying this is a sold out building. You don't gain extra points for this is a sold out building, and by the way, you probably couldn't afford to be here. That doesn't help anybody. When you hear sold out building, you're not thinking, oh, well, they sold out, but the tickets were only $30. Like, you're just thinking that they sold out.
Yep, exactly. Yep. By the way, this is a false thing that people say. Trip McNeely says the number of viewers doesn't matter, just the 1849 demo. And if it's in the Tokyo Dome, chef's kiss. Maybe he's being sarcastic. I guess he's being sarcastic there. But Netflix just wants people to pay money to buy their service, and they want people to watch their ads. I've seen headlines going that 18 to 49, that 25 to 54 is the new 18 to 49, and that advertisers are actually, and cable, they just want total number of viewers now because everybody's buying cars. And the idea of the young audience mattering is people haven't made they have income to spend, but they also haven't, especially when they're younger, they don't have brand allegiance yet. And that's why they like to get younger viewers. When you're 60, you're going to buy your Honda if you like your Honda. But if you're 25, maybe Kia can win you over if they see their logo in an NBA game. So that's all in play. But Netflix wants subscriber money, and they'll take it from anybody. And WWE wants ticket buyers, and it's including, 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds taking, going to the matches too. Tripp says he was just having fun, by the way. Go ahead. Yeah.
With the idea too of possibly driving people to USA, you never know. And I think a lot about when WWE first announced this move to Netflix. I saw a lot of people talking like, I think getting over the shock of Raw no longer being on what is traditional television. And, I had I had that thought in the back of my head too, but then I very quickly was thinking about the fact that, like, just anecdotally in my life personally, I know a lot of people.
She want no part of that. My cat made a cameo for our podcast listeners. Well, by cameo, I picked her up off the ground, and she wanted no part of it. She just wants her food. She and the dog.
She did give a yell, so yeah. They heard her.
They heard that, yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of people personally in my own life who do not have cable.
Yeah.
I cannot think of, and I'm sure there are many, but right now, I can think of one person in my life, a family member, who doesn't have a Netflix account.
Yeah.
Really and truly.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I mean, right now there's a big overlap, but there's people who have Netflix and don't have cable, and there's people who have cable and don't have Netflix. Netflix skews younger. That is, it's better than not, but it's not the be all end all. All right, let's wrap up there. Brandon, thank you. Fun show. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a lot of fun. I was glad to do it. Yeah. It was a good one to jump on for.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody, if you like our tone and the way we approach covering wrestling, one thing you can do is support us with a VIP membership. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. You'll get a lot in return for your support of us through a subscription. You can support us directly with your Apple account on your iPhone. You can do it through Spotify and Patreon. You can also do a credit card, debit card, and PayPal. Full details, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. We will bring professional coverage and experience and a wide array of opinions. There's a diverse staff with a diverse group of perspectives and different ages and different things people are passionate about. We're proud of the product we put out, and we'd love to have your support. So join us, PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Be part of our community of some, I think, really smart and passionate wrestling fans of all ages and all demographics. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Again, tomorrow night, the Blue Logo Show, Wade Keller Podcast. Jason Paul joining me. We'll cover these emails about tonight's show. I'm sure the primary focus will be Netflix, but we'll cover AEW, Tokyo Dome, and other things too. Check out PWTorch.com for results of everything that happened this past weekend with New Japan and AEW, and the story about the commentary controversy that is stemming from that, and much more. Also, PWTorch.com has some 30-year Raw reports. 30 years ago, Raw reports of the Porcelain Torch newsletter. It's kind of fun to see what I was writing about Raw 30 years ago, and we put them up along with other archives on PWTorch.com. Thanks, everybody, and we will talk to you on the flagship tomorrow, and then right back here on YouTube on Wednesday night after Dynamite.